Chapter 75. Tea fighting was also known as tea fighting or tea fighting. It was an elegant game for the rich and idle people in ancient times. After the new tea was produced every spring, the tea farmers and customers would compare the quality of the new tea. The outcome of a tea fighting competition was like the outcome of a football match today. It was widely watched by the public. From the emperor to the commoners, everyone was keen to participate. Even if there was a tea fight, there must be tea first. According to the rules of a tea fight, both sides would usually bring good tea to the battle. The tea with good quality would naturally have a big advantage in judging the outcome. However, according to this rule, it was obviously unfair to the Wu Ren inspection team. They came all the way from East Asia, so how could they happen to bring good tea suitable for the tea fight? Lu Chaoga and Matsushima Nori discussed and decided to use the same tea leaves and buy tea on the spot at Qingfeng Tea House. In this way, neither the Vermilion Bird or the Wu Ren investigation team would be able to take advantage of the tea leaves. Both sides could only compete based on their tea ordering skills and control of the heat. Duan Yujun attached great importance to this tea fight, so he took the initiative to say to Lu Chaoga, "Why don't we have a pu or tea? I still have half a pancake of old tree tea in my collection. Originally, I was going to use it to fight the Lingnan Tea King. It just so happens that I found a tale of good quality to Hong Pao tea in the past few days, so I decided to donate this half a pancake of pu'er tea to support the education of our Vermilion Bird Middle School. After all, we are neighbors." Lu Chaoga liked drinking tea. She did not know much about tea, but she knew that a pancake of high-quality pu'er tea could be sold for a sky-high price. It was rare for Duan Yujun to donate his collection now. "Thank you, Mr. Duan," Lu Chaoga said gratefully. "The tea fight in your tea house has already disturbed me a lot, and now I'm wasting your collection. I feel really bad." Duan Yujun smiled and said, "I've been drinking tea and competing with people all my life. Today is the happiest day." "Why?" "Because our tea ceremony and tea skills have successors." Duan Yujun lowered his voice and said softly, "Besides, I have my own selfish motives. If I use my tea leaves to suppress those little East Asians, I will also be proud, right? I can brag about it to my fellow tea drinkers, and it will give me a lot of face." "We'll try our best," Lu Chaoga said. She told Matsushima Ki about Duan Yojun's willingness to donate tea leaves, and Matsushima Ki smiled and bowed to Duan Yujun to thank him. Duan Yujun chuckled and waved his hand, looking very embarrassed. He was indeed embarrassed. Duan Yujun was determined to defeat the East Asians, but Matsushima Takashi thanked him with a straight face. Duan Yujun was a simple and honest man, and he wouldn't do such a two-faced thing. Therefore, he refused to accept the apology and only wanted Rosefinch to win the tea. The venue, the judges, and the tea leaves had all been arranged. All that was left was for the contestants from both sides to take the stage. Matsushima Ki turned around and spoke to Saburo Fujino, who was standing behind him. "Let Chiba Kaoru come up." "I will make the arrangements," Fujino Saburo replied and quickly ran down the stairs of the tea house. A black Toyota van was parked in front of the tea house. Saburo Fujino ran over and knocked on the van's window. The van's door opened. A cute doll's head appeared and she asked, "Teacher Fujino, is everything ready?" "Everything is ready," Saburo Fujino said with a smile. "Where is Kaoru?" "You can go upstairs now." "All right," a female voice replied from inside the van. Saburo Fujino reached out with his hand and a fair and small hand grabbed his arm. Then, the hand carefully came out. The girl was very beautiful. When she smiled, she looked just like a young Sakai Noriko. She had a slim figure and a clean temperament. She wore a kimono embroidered with cherry blossoms and wooden clogs. It was a standard East Asian style attire. The doll followed suit and got out of the van. The Toyota van remained at the same spot and did not leave. They had borrowed this van from an East Asian company in order to transport the contestants for this afternoon's tea competition. The art of tea was extensive and profound. The preparatory work was even more tedious and complicated. Chiba Kaoru was a descendant of a East Asian tea ceremony family. She had a deep understanding of the art of tea. Due to her beautiful appearance and extraordinary temperament, she was an influential figure in Wuren High School. She was the campus belle of Wuren and a goddess in the hearts of countless male students. It was also because of her existence that Saburo Fujino had specifically proposed a tea ceremony competition when he was provoking Fang Yen. From the very beginning, Saburo Fujino had set up an ambush for his side to win this battle. Autumn and Huaching was still hot. If Chiba Kaoru had been allowed to follow them around in her kimono, she would have been soaked in sweat before she could even brew the tea. For a tea ceremony performer, that was a fatal injury. The Toyota van was spacious and would not give off a feeling of suffocation. The air conditioner was turned on and the temperature was just right. It would not give Chiba Kaoru a feeling of stuffiness. More importantly, the van contained aromatherapy essential oil that they had specially prepared. It was placed in the air conditioner's vent. As the cold air permeated the interior of the van, Chiba Kaoru's body would be soaked in the essential oil. With a wave of her hand, a faint and sweet scent of mint would naturally flow out. Sniffing it in detail would make one feel refreshed and comfortable. That was also the reason why Wuren's inspection team had only come down to invite Chiba Kaoru to the tea house when the competition officially began. An expert would be able to tell right from the start. Just by looking at Chiba Kaoru's attire, the way she spoke, and the way she walked, Fang Yen was certain that she was a top-class girl. Isn't this girl too beautiful? Chiba Kaoru stood in front of the coffee table and bowed deeply to everyone in the room. Then, she sat down gracefully. The stone table. The stone chair. The Japanese beauty. They complemented each other and were pleasing to the eye. Fang Yen stood up and said, "Please wait a moment, everyone." He ran to the tea house and took out his phone to make a call. Before he could make the call, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom had already stopped in front of him. Click. The door to the front passenger seat opened. A tall and skinny old man in a gray robe walked to the back quickly and opened the door. "Miss, please," said the old man in a long robe respectfully. "Thank you, Uncle Lin." A familiar voice came from the car. Then, Fang Yen saw a scene that made his eyes pop out. He saw a man in a plain white robe. No, it was a traditional Chinese costume. Qin Tian, who was wearing a white traditional Chinese costume, got out of the back of the Rolls-Royce. After smiling sweetly at the tall and skinny old man, he walked toward Fang Yen. The traditional Chinese costume was simple and elegant. There were no bright red or green flowers to match it. Only the clothes were surrounded by a group of white cranes on auspicious clouds. Each crane was vivid and lifelike. When they walked, they gave people the illusion that they were flying in the sky. When they calmed down, they seemed to be able to hear their celestial cries. It was soft and gentle, yet majestic. She was graceful and elegant, yet she gave off an ethereal aura. To be honest, apart from Qin Tian, Fang Yen really couldn't think of anyone he knew who could set off this costume so perfectly. Even those movie stars couldn't do it. "Miss, I'll wait for you to go back," the tall and skinny old man said to Qin Tian. Then, he nodded at Fang Yen with a smile and went back to the front passenger seat. The Rolls-Royce left slowly as if it had never been there. However, there was clearly a fairy left in the world. The tea house girl who greeted the guests at the door was about to cry. What day is it today? Why is everyone dressed so formally? If I had known this, shouldn't I have laid a red carpet at the door of the tea house? Women, why are you making things difficult for us women? Until Qin Tian's little hand put on Fang Yan's arm, Fang Yan hadn't fully reacted. He looked at Qin Tian dumbfounded and asked, "What are you doing?" Qin Tian smiled charmingly and said, "Tea competition." "It's just a tea competition. Do you need to dress like this?" Fang Yan pointed to the Rolls-Royce that had just left and said, "Did you rent that car? How much is it a day? It's not worth it to use it just for a while, right?" It's not just a tea competition, but also a beauty competition. Clothes competition, temperament competition, aura competition. I want to defeat my opponent in all aspects. Qinitian thought for a moment and asked, Wu Ren's side has a beautiful woman, right? Yes. Fang Yan nodded. That's good, Qinitian said. What do you mean? Fang Yan was puzzled. Didn't women like to beat their opponents? Why did Qinitian let out a sigh of relief when she heard that the girl was a beauty? You don't understand. A smug smile appeared on Qinitian's mouth. If Wu Ren's side had sent a man, Qinitian's appearance would have been amazing. However, everyone felt that she had an unfair advantage. If the opponent was also a beautiful woman, and a beautiful woman at that, then, if Qinitian defeated her, it would show her temperament and aura even more. What was the saying again? To see a person's achievement pattern was to see what kind of person his opponent was. To see a woman's appearance was the same. Red flowers needed green leaves to match. If you could stand out among a group of red flowers, wouldn't it be even more amazing? Yes, Qinitian hoped that her opponent would be stronger. Fang Yan stretched out his arm and helped Qinitian slowly go upstairs. He felt that he was a little eunuch serving the queen. What was the style of a star? What was the style of a queen? As Fang Yan accompanied Qinitian upstairs, all the people they met stood on the side and stared at them. No one whispered, no one raised their voices. They held their breath, as if they were afraid to disturb the queen's tour. When Qinitian appeared at the door of the Breeze Pavilion, it was exactly as Fang Yan expected. The whole place was silent, and everyone kept a 90-degree turn posture. As if a magician had cast a spell, they couldn't speak and couldn't move their eyes. At this moment, even the wind outside the window found it difficult to breathe. Chapter 76. Qinitian ignored everyone's stares. He let go of Fang Yan's arm and walked toward Chiba Keiru. Chiba Keiru knew that this beautiful and domineering woman was her opponent for the day the moment she saw Qinitian. One's alcohol tolerance depended on one's character. It depended on how one drank and how one behaved after getting drunk. One's tea taste depended on one's attire and temperament. When a person's mental state was at its peak, the tea fight would naturally be full and mellow, and the tea brewed would naturally be full and have an endless aftertaste. One wouldn't drink alcohol because it would be bitter. It wouldn't harm the tea, because the tea would taste like blood. Qinitian walked toward Chiba Keiru step by step. With every step he took, his arrogant attitude and domineering aura got closer. Thud, 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 Qinitian's footsteps weren't heavy, but they seemed to be echoing in Chiba Keiru's heart. Chiba Keiru felt like she had lost her mind and was at a loss for what to do. She avoided Qinitian's gaze to avoid the increasingly powerful airflow that seemed to be able to engulf everything. I'm going to lose. A ridiculous thought popped up in her mind. However, it only lasted for a second before she refocused and looked into Qinitian's eyes. I must win. Chiba Keiru clenched her fists and told herself in her heart. She knew that her opponent was doing it on purpose. She was using her domineering aura to trample on her and her beauty to suppress her. She was using all her advantages. Her essence, chi, and spirit were in an invincible state of excitement. An opponent like that was terrifying and worthy of respect. However, she must win. Qinitian stood in front of Chiba Keiru and looked down at her. His voice was cold, and there was no smile on his face. I'm Qinitian. You must remember this name. She was speaking in Japanese. She was actually speaking fluent Japanese. Fang Yan's English was passable, but he knew almost nothing about Japanese. Except for a few words that often appeared in movies and TV works. Fang Yan asked Lu Chaoga in front of him, what did she say? I am Qinitian. You will definitely remember this name, Lu Chaoga said expressionlessly. He thought to himself that he had heard of Qinitian's name a long time ago. However, they had never crossed paths before. Seeing is believing. Now that he had seen her with his own eyes, he finally felt that she was different from the rest. Was this kind of student really just an ordinary student? In her eyes, there was probably nothing worthy of her attention, right? Lu Chaoga thought of Fang Yan again. Qin Etian took the initiative to transfer from Class 1 to Class 9, where Fang Yan was. Could it be that the rumors on campus were true, that Qin Etian liked Fang Yan? If that was the case, things were going to be terrible. Everything about him is good, but he has bad taste. Lu Chaoga made an appropriate evaluation of Qin Etian in her mind. Fang Yan was also shocked by this sentence. He thought to himself that this woman was really arrogant. She always looked like she was the only one in the world. Chiba Sun couldn't sit still anymore. She stood up and bowed to Qin Etian with a smile. Chiba Sun, please advise me. It's my duty, Qin Etian said. I will let you know what a real tea ceremony is. Chiba Sun wanted to vomit blood. That was just a humble way of saying it. Please advise me was a common saying among Japanese. Why did this woman take it seriously? Qin Etian walked back to his seat and sat down, waiting for the competition to officially begin. Music, Duan Yujun shouted. Soothing classical music sounded, and the sweet and crisp voice of a young girl echoed in the box of the breeze pavilion. Fang Yan listened carefully. The singer was singing the famous Tea Battle song written by Fan Zhongyan, a scholar of the Northern Song dynasty. Spring comes from the southeast every year, Jinshi is the first to warm the ice. The strange tea by the stream is the best in the world, Wui immortals have been around since ancient times. Last night, where the new thunder comes from, every family laughs and passes through the clouds. The dew buds are scattered in glory, decorated with jade and pearls, scattered on the tree. The harvest is not full, only the essence dares not to be greedy. Grinding cream and baking milk have elegant production, Fang Zhonggui has He Zhongchan. The North Garden will be presented to the Emperor, the heroes of the forest compete for beauty first. Duan Yujun was a judge and also the host of this tea battle. He stood in front of the two tea fighters and said, the tea is pu-er. It's provided by the Breeze Tea House. The water is mineral water and tap water. There are many brands of mineral water, and you can choose freely. As Duan Yujun spoke, the waiter of the tea house had already brought more than a dozen kinds of mineral water brands and placed them in front of the two tea fighters. Duan Yujun opened a tea house and was also a master of the tea ceremony. Because he often competed with people, he had prepared enough kinds of mineral water brands in the tea house. It had to be known that the water quality of each tea fighter was different. He had prepared more to take into account the requirements of each tea fighter as much as possible. Qin Etian waved his hand and said, I'll bring my own water. As soon as Qin Etian's voice fell, he saw a few boys carrying a small stove in. The charcoal fire in the stove was burning brightly, and on the stove, a copper pot was making a crashing sound. The water had just boiled, white smoke was rolling, and water vapor was filling the air. The tea immortal Lu Yu's, the classic of tea, said, to boil tea, the first fire is charcoal, and the second is firewood. Charcoal stained with oil, firewood, or rotten materials can't be used as fuel. If you don't pay attention to the details, it will be difficult to make a fine product. From this, it could be seen how broad and profound the culture of tea was. How clear and thorough our ancient people's research was. In the art of tea fighting, the tea was valued for its freshness, and the water used for tea fighting was valued for its freshness. Mineral water was stagnant water that had been processed, and the quality of tap water was even more worrying. However, when there was really no other way, the tea fighters could only use mineral water. That was because there was no other choice. They couldn't go to the deep waters and old forests to fight tea, could they? Even if they found a suitable spring, how could they bring the tea fighting tools there? Qin Etian didn't hide it. He pointed to the copper stove on the charcoal fire and said, this is running water from Tiger Mountain. It's transported by water. The lotus leaves cover the surface, so it won't attract dust and waste gas. It's clean and natural. Duan Yujun was in a dilemma. Chinitian was using the running water from Tiger Mountain. What if the East Asians felt that it was unfair? However, even if they were not satisfied, Duan Yujun couldn't solve this problem. He himself used mineral water to fight tea with others. Where could he get the running water from Tiger Mountain? Although Tiger Mountain was part of Huaqing's territory, it was far away and the mountain roads had not been developed. They could only travel by water. Who would have the thought and ability to go there and bring back a bucket of spring water? What Duan Yujun didn't expect was that someone would actually do it. Moreover, the person who did this was the famous Du Qing of Huaqing. Yes, Chinitian's water was provided by Du Qing. Strictly speaking, Du Qing's water was provided to Lu Gong. Fang Yan had specially borrowed the spring water from his grandfather for Chinitian to use for the tea fighting competition. Someone translated Duan Yojun's words to the Wuren inspection team. Saburo Fujino panicked and said, "This is cheating. Who doesn't know that the water quality is the most important in the tea ceremony? If the water quality isn't good, how can the brewed soup be good? This is unfair to our side. I strongly protest." The others also questioned and said yes. Hua Xia was too cunning. Because we came from afar, they took advantage of us in terms of raw materials. If they won like this, they wouldn't be considered capable. If they're not convinced, they can go to Japan and compete again. Chinitian waved her hand and said heroically, "Wu Ren can share the water from the copper pot with me." As soon as she said that, everyone fell silent. Those who had been clamoring just now seemed to have been slapped to the ground by her. They didn't even have the strength to get up. "Didn't you say that I wanted to take advantage of you?" "Sorry, I don't want to take advantage of you. The tea is the same tea, the water is the same water, I will still win." Fang Yan was happy. Even though she didn't like Chinitian's condescending, arrogant, and straightforward personality, she found her to be quite adorable today. Only she could act like this, and only she could speak and act in such a natural and harmonious manner. This was Chinitian, the Chinitian who never hid her edge. Lu Chaoga nodded slightly as well. She thought that this sentence would determine the winner of this tea ceremony. A tea ceremony wasn't just about the color of the tea or the soup, but also the breadth of mind of the tea drinker. No one present could match Chinitian's generosity. She was far inferior to him. Chiba Sun didn't feel happy when she heard Chinitian's invitation. Instead, she looked gloomy. She stood up and bowed slightly to Chinitian. "Thank you for your kindness. However, I've decided to use mineral water. When I first learned the tea ceremony, my father once said that if your heart is sweet, then the water you use will be sweet as well. I know what this competition means, so I'll do my best. I have a sincere heart, so the water I use will be sincere as well." She couldn't accept Chinitian's invitation. Because if she had done that, the winner of this tea battle would have been decided in advance. Her teachers and classmates didn't understand, but she did. She decided to use softness to overcome hardness. After hearing Chiba Sun's words, Wu Ren's teachers and students looked serious. They looked at Chiba Sun with respect. At this moment, because of Chiba Sun's words, the Wu Ren inspection team became unprecedentedly united. Even the teachers and students of Rosefinch looked at Chiba Sun in a different light after hearing her words. This girl was qualified to be Chinitian's opponent. Chiba Sun didn't even look at them. She poured a bottle of mineral water into the iron kettle and turned on the electric stove. She used mineral water and boiled it on the electric stove. Chapter 77. It was often said that water and fire were incompatible. However, in the tea ceremony, water and fire had to work together in harmony to bring out the greatest power. The water in the bronze stove was boiling, bubbling. Chinitian left her seat and walked over to open the lid of the bronze kettle. She carefully observed the boiling water in the kettle. The first boil was like a fish's eye, making a faint sound. The second boil was like a gushing spring with pearls. The third boil was like a rattan wave. After the third boil, Chinitian immediately lifted the handle and moved the bronze kettle away from the charcoal. The bronze kettle was very big, but when Chinitian lifted it, she seemed effortless and easy. This woman was really good at playing the role of an Iron Man. "Seal the stove," Chinitian said. The boys from Class 9 immediately sealed the mouth of the stove with a piece of iron. Then, they carried the charcoal stove and left. The degree of boiling of the water was the key to the success of the tea ceremony. If it was a tender shoot, it naturally needed to use boiling water with a lower degree. It was to avoid damaging the leaves and spoiling the taste. However, the tea today was aged pu-er tea. Therefore, the water needed to be boiled 3 times. It was also recorded in the classic of tea that when the water was boiled 3 times, the tea had to be brewed. If it was boiled any longer, the water would turn old and become inedible. Chinitian poured the water from the bronze kettle into a cup to rinse it. This was called a tea cup. If the tea cup was cooled, the tea wouldn't float. There was a small teapot on the tea table in front of her. However, Chinitian didn't pour the water from the bronze kettle into the small teapot. Because she knew that the water would come into contact with the air one more time after the water was poured. Changing the utensils meant that the tea might be mixed with the air one more time. The temperature and quality of the water would change slightly. Her slender hands were holding an ancient bronze kettle that weighed more than 10 kilograms. This scene was strange and beautiful at the same time. The most amazing thing was that when she held the kettle with one hand and poured the boiling water into the cup, not a single drop spilled out. This alone wasn't something an ordinary person could do. According to Fang Yan's plan, Chinitian should wait for a while. They waited for the contestants from the Wu Ren investigation team to brew the tea. Everyone tasted the tea and praised it. Only then did Qin-yi perform the tea ceremony and serve the tea she had brewed with great care to everyone. Just smelling the fragrance was enough to intoxicate them. When he drank it in one gulp, he felt that this tea could only be found in the heavens and rarely seen in the mortal world. Thus, Chinitian was the winner of the tea contest. She suppressed it first and then raised it, so that everyone's mood soared from the bottom to the peak. First, she made everyone anxious, then gave them a surprise. In this case, this surprise was even more memorable. In any competition, the second competition, the first cup, and then the competition. After drinking the tea of the later generations, do you still remember the taste of the previous cup of tea? Unless the taste of the 2 cups of tea was very different, but if they were of the same standard, then the second cup of tea would definitely be more advantageous. However, Chinitian clearly did not appreciate Fang Yan's efforts. She did not play according to Fang Yan's plan. She didn't wait for her opponent. After the water boiled, she cleaned the utensils, warmed the water, and poured the cups. This series of actions was smooth and pleasing to the eye. Then, she put the tea cake on a piece of white silk, broke it into pieces, and removed all the coarse leaves and foam. Only then did she put the tea leaves into the pot. She put it carefully and must not let the tea leaves block the mouth of the pot. She poured the tea into the copper pot. After shaking it 3 times, she immediately poured the tea out. This was called washing tea. After washing the tea could be brewed. Brewing tea was the most important step. She must not go straight to the center of the pot. First, one corner, and then the other corners. The spout of the copper pot was raised, strictly following the principle of high rush and low sprinkle. The high rush could make the boiling water hit the tea leaves forcefully, so that the fragrance and tea essence of the tea would evaporate faster. The tannins could not be dissolved in time, so the tea was sweet but not astringent. The water must be filled. Whether the teapot was 3 mountains together showed the skill. Chinitian looked relaxed, but her eyes were serious. The tea quickly filled the teapot. The foam floated, but there was no spill. He had the demeanor of a grandmaster. After completing this tedious but necessary process, he covered the pot with the lid and poured boiling water over it. It was called the pouring pot. After the cup was heated, the tea could be poured for the guests. Chinitian only poured 4 cups of tea from the pot. He waved his long sleeve and said, "Please." Lu Chaoga came over, picked up a cup of tea, and tasted it carefully. Matsushima Ki also came over, picked up the second cup of tea, and looked at the color of the tea. Duan Yujun sighed, walked to Lu Chaoga, bowed deeply, and then carefully picked up the third cup of tea. Chinitian picked up the fourth cup of tea and took the initiative to give it to Fang Yan. He said with a smile, "Fang Yan, this cup of tea is for you." "You?" Fang Yan pretended to be angry, but he was overjoyed. "Look, there are only 4 cups of tea." Except for the 3 judges, Chinitian didn't give it to anyone else. He didn't give it to the vice principal, the dean, or the leader of the Chinese team, but he just gave it to him. What kind of behavior was this? Respect for teachers. What did this mean? It meant that he was a qualified and excellent teacher who was respected by his students. Fang Yan took the tea, tasted it carefully, and said, "Good tea." Chinitian finished his tea ceremony, and the tea was already in his hand. Therefore, the 3 judges naturally had to give their evaluation. After Lu Chaoga finished the cup of tea, she carefully felt the sweet and moist taste in her throat, and said first, "I don't know much about tea. But I still know it's good tea. Good tea, good water, and good tea ceremony. It's amazing." Matsushima Ki held the tea, smelled the fragrance, and then observed the color. Then he tasted it, and said, "The color is green and white, and the soup is fine. It's an excellent tea." The color of the tea was white, and the green was better than the yellow. And the soup needed to be thin and well proportioned, like cold porridge noodles. If one could bite on the edge of the cup and stay there for a long time, the effect would be the best. It was called biting cup. Matsushima Ki also liked to drink tea, and she had done some research on the tea ceremony. It was also because of this that she knew how perfect and profound the girl in front of her was in the tea ceremony. Without more than 10 years of immersion, it would be impossible for her to reach this level, right? Duan Yujun only drank half of the tea in his hand, and he hesitated to drink the other half. He praised, "The tea immortal has returned. The tea immortal has returned. After seeing this tea ceremony today, I will never compete in tea with others again. I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed." While everyone was appraising the tea brewed by Chinitian, Chiba Kaori's tea ceremony had just reached the high infusion, low infusion part of the tea ceremony. Her face was expressionless, and her heart was as still as water. She only focused on her own actions, completely unaffected by external factors. Even when Chinitian brought the tea to Fang Yan, she did not divert her attention. It was as if everything around her had nothing to do with her. The heart is the tea, and the tea is the heart. The heart is the tea, and the tea is the heart. 4 teacups were placed on each tea tray, and Chiba Kaori only chose one to heat the tea. After that, she poured the tea for the guests. Chiba Kaori picked up the only cup of tea before her and walked toward Chinitian. She said, "This cup of tea represents my respect. Please be sure to accept it." Chinitian looked at Chiba Kaori with a thoughtful expression. Only now did he truly begin to respect this Japanese girl. "Chiba Kaori, hurry up and give a cup to each of the judges," Saburo Fujino urged. "What is wrong with this child? The judges have yet to drink their tea. How can she give tea to her opponent first? Besides, the judges have never tasted your tea. How can they know how beautiful your tea is?" Chiba Kaori did not reply to Saburo Fujino's question. Her beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at Chinitian, who was a head taller than her. Chinitian picked up the cup of tea and carefully tasted it. The first sip was shallow, the second sip was deep, and the third sip was straight down. He looked at Chiba Kaori and said in a soft voice, "Good tea." "Thank you." Chiba Kaori's taut face immediately relaxed. She gave a 90-degree bow toward Chinitian and said gratefully, "Thank you." Saburo Fujino could not be bothered to maintain his composure. He quickly ran toward Chiba Kaori and grabbed her shoulder. He shouted, "Chiba Kaori, what are you doing? Do you know what you are doing? How can you do this? How can you give up? Do you know that you are not only giving up on yourself, you are also giving up on us, the pride of our Wu-Ren and the face of Japan? How can you give up?" Chiba Kaori turned to look at Saburo Fujino. There was a sweet smile on her face as she said, "Sensei Fujino, I lost. I lost my mind, I lost my aura, and I lost my confidence. She is perfect. Her performance was impeccable. I thought that as long as I waited a little longer, I would be able to find a flaw. However, from the beginning to the end, she did not give me a single chance." Chiba Kaori had also thought that Chinitian would wait. Chinitian was waiting for her to brew a good tea. Only then would she surpass her. She thought that Chinitian would do that. Isn't that what people think? Her actions lagged behind Chinitian. Part of it was because she had to boil the tea again, but it was also because of the knot in her heart. She wanted to be the final victor. Why did she think that? Why did she do that? At the end of the day, it was because she did not have enough confidence in herself. She did not have confidence in herself. She did not have confidence in her tea. How could a tea that lacked spirit, energy, and spirit win against someone else? However, Chinitian did not do that. She did not fight or wait. She was simple and direct. She did what she wanted, regardless of the consequences. She disdained scheming and did not want to use overt schemes. She only wanted to be herself. She did her best. She did her best. She did her best. She was Chinitian. She believed that she would definitely win. Such an opponent was able to easily subdue her. He was worthy of her respect. Although Chiba Kaori had a smile on her face, there were tears in the corner of her eyes. "Sensei, please let me admit defeat," Chiba Kaori said with a choked voice. "At least you will look more dignified this way." Chapter 78. There was a type of opponent that deserved respect even if they lost. Chiba Kaoru was one of them. Looking at Chiba Kaoru's tear-stained face, Chinitian could not help but laugh. She stretched out her hand and looked at Chiba Kaoru, saying, "From today onwards, we are friends." She spoke in Japanese, so Chiba Kaoru did not need an interpreter to understand her words. Chiba Kaoru stared at Chinitian with wide eyes, a look of incomprehension on her face. "Are you not willing?" Chinitian asked. "Not everyone can be my friend." "I am willing." Chiba Kaoru quickly stretched out her hand and shook Chinitian's. "It is my honor." Clap clap clap, Matsushima Ki was the first to applaud. Lu Chaoga, Fong Yen, the Wu-Ren inspection team, and the teachers and students of Rosefinch Secondary also applauded. Matsushima Ki walked to Chiba Kaoru and gently hugged her in her arms, saying, "Kaoru, you did well. Very well. In our hearts, you did not lose. You had the courage to admit your shortcomings. This makes us happier than winning this tea competition." "Thank you, Sensei," Chiba Kaoru said gratefully. Her choice was recognized, and her personality was still loved and respected. Her teacher and compatriot did not blame or resent her. Chiba Kaoru was very happy. "No need to thank me. Your performance was too good," Matsushima Ki said with a smile. She took out a handkerchief and handed it to Chiba Kaoru, saying, "Wipe your tears." The Chiba Kaoru I know is not a student who likes to cry. "Yes, Sensei." Chiba Kaoru took the handkerchief and wiped her tears. Matsushima Ki turned to Saburo Fujino and said, "Sensei Fujino, Chiba Kaoru did her best, didn't she?" "Yes," Saburo Fujino said with his head lowered, feeling very depressed. In the first tea competition, he had deliberately hidden his nuclear weapon, thinking that he would win for sure. He did not expect Rosefinch to also use a nuclear weapon. Wu-Ren's side used a guided missile, while Rosefinch's side used an atomic bomb. This was too much. "So, please maintain your manners, okay?" Matsushima Ki did not let go of Saburo Fujino that easily. With a sharp look in his eyes, he said, "You should know that you represent the pride of Takahito and the face of Japan." "Yes. I understand," Saburo Fujino apologized profusely. "I was too excited." Matsushima Nori also knew that berating his own team members in front of outsiders would make them look down on him. Even if he was dissatisfied, he could only hide his emotions in his heart. She walked in front of Lu Chaoga and said, "Wu Ren lost the first tea ceremony competition. I'm sincerely convinced. Friendship first, competition second." Lu Chaoga comforted him in a soft voice. At this time, she was too embarrassed to smile too obviously. Although she was very happy in her heart. "Then, shall we proceed to the second round of the competition?" Matsushima Nori said. "I hope Wu Ren can win the next match." "No problem," Lu Chaoga said. "I'm looking forward to Wu Ren's performance." After the tea ceremony was over, there was no need for Chinitian to stay any longer. She waved at Fang Yen and said, "Fang Yen, help me down." Fang Yen quickly ran in front of Chinitian and whispered, "There are so many people here, give me some face, all right." Chinitian was very easy to talk to. "Fang Yen, help me down." "Can you call me teacher?" "Impossible." Fang Yen helped Chinitian down the stairs. After standing in front of the tea house for less than 2 minutes, the black Rolls-Royce Phantom stopped in front of them. This time, Fang Yen did not wait for the little old man to get out of the car. He rushed over and opened the rear door. Fang Yen said to Chinitian, "Thank you for your hard work today. Go back and have a good rest." Chinitian looked at Fang Yen with a smile and said, "Fang Yen, do you want me to leave as soon as possible?" "How is that possible?" Fang Yen looked like he was wronged. "Do you know how heartless you are to say this? You are my benefactor. You helped me win the tea ceremony competition. You don't know how grateful I am to you now. We, the people of Wulin, pay attention to a drop of kindness from others. How could I treat my benefactor like this?" "Really? Then how are you going to repay me?" Chinitian asked calmly. "Haven't I already repaid you?" Fang Yen said. "When did you repay me?" "I gave you a bucket of water," Fang Yen said. In all honesty, he took a bucket of spring water from Tiger Mountain from his grandfather's house. He was not willing to drink it. He gave all of it to Chinitian. A drop of water's kindness should be repaid with a bucket of water. Wasn't that enough? Chinitian squinted his eyes and smiled. He said, "Fang Yen, you are so cute." Fang Yen thought about it again and again. He still did not think that this sentence was a compliment. Chinitian reached out to Fang Yen and said, "Give me the phone." "Why do you want my phone?" Fang Yen felt very strange. Why did all the girls he knew like to borrow his phone? Jiang Qin was like this, Yuan Lin was like this. Now even Chinitian was like this. "Give it to me," Chinitian said. Fang Yen had no choice but to take out his mobile phone from his pocket and hand it over. Chinitian turned on the camera of Fang Yan's mobile phone, then put his head close to Fang Yan's shoulder and pressed the shutter. Fang Yen was shocked and said, "What do you want to do? Don't think that I will be responsible for you just because you have something on me. Anyway, I didn't do anything. I am innocent and have a clear conscience." "Why are you so excited?" Chinitian asked strangely. She threw Fang Yan's mobile phone back and said, "It's rare for me to wear a traditional Chinese costume. I accompanied you to take 2 photos for you to show off on Weibo. What does it have to do with your innocence?" "I see." Fang Yen clenched the phone and was relieved. Ever since those reporters had gotten their hands on a photo of him dancing with Jiang Qin, he had been on tenterhooks. When he saw girls taking the initiative to take photos, he was worried that they were up to no good. "What do you think it is?" Chinitian said contemptuously. "Fang Yen, put away your wretched thoughts. I warn you, don't scold me." "Or what?" "I will make you fail the Chinese exam." Fang Yan threatened. Idiot. You scold me again. Chinitian sneered and lifted her skirt to get into the luxury car. Although the little old man sitting in the passenger seat did not have the opportunity to help Chinitian open the door, he still got out and stood respectfully on the side. After Chinitian got in the car, he helped close the rear door. Then he smiled at Fang Yan and said, "Goodbye, Mr. Fang." "Goodbye, old man," Fang Yan said with relief. He thought that not everyone was as rude as Chinitian. After the car drove away, Fang Yan was still standing in the same place, waving. He thought, it's just a tea contest. Why did he rent such a beautiful car? How much would it cost? Fang Yan returned to the box in Cool Breeze Pavilion. The second round of the calligraphy competition was about to begin. Although Cool Breeze Tea House was a tea house, it had a large desk and 4 treasures of the study specially for scholars. As long as they were guests in the tea house, they could do whatever they wanted. Therefore, there was no need to look for another place for the calligraphy competition. It could be held directly in the tea house. The first round had a bad start, so Saburo Fujino kept a low profile. He walked in front of Fang Yan and said with a blank face, "How will the competition be conducted?" "Both contestants will write a piece of calligraphy. Then we will evaluate it," Fang Yan said. Saburo Fujino sneered and said, "If one side writes Hua-xia calligraphy and the other side writes Japanese calligraphy, how will they compare?" Fang Yan also laughed and said, "Mr. Fujino seems to be a layman for asking this question. As long as there is strength in the brush, any word written will be beautiful. Even if it is a circle, it will be more beautiful than others. Could it be that a person's Hua-xia calligraphy is beautiful, but the English alphabet is not beautiful? It will still be beautiful. Easy for you to say. The art of calligraphy is broad and profound. Different languages, different contents, different styles, naturally, the effect will be different." Saburo Fujino did not agree with Fang Yan's point of view and said, "We should unify the language and the content. That way, it will be more convenient to compete and determine the winner. Isn't it better for everyone to write what they are good at? Our contestant will naturally write Hua-xia calligraphy, and your representative can also write Hua-xia calligraphy. In any case, didn't you all start from practicing Hua-xia calligraphy?" "Ridiculous," Saburo Fujino said mockingly. "Looking at the sky from the bottom of a well, that's probably what people like you are, right? Without investigation, you have no right to speak. Otherwise, don't open your mouth and be laughed at. My East Asian calligraphy is unique. What does it have to do with your Hua-xia calligraphy?" Calligraphy originated from Hua-xia and gradually spread to the various countries in the Han culture circle. The changes in the calligraphy of Hua-xia's dynasties continued to have a comprehensive and profound impact on East Asian calligraphy. It was only during the later part of the Heian period that East Asians' unique pseudonymous calligraphy rose, forming the auspicious system that is different from Hua-xia's calligraphy. However, in my opinion, the auspicious system is still a slight change on the basis of Hua-xia's calligraphy. Some things can be said to be borrowed or plagiarized. The key is to look at the relationship between the two parties. Am I right? Fang Yan looked at Saburo Fujino and said, "If you try to please me from time to time, I can also say that you are using it as a reference. If you always use such a cynical attitude to talk to me, I will scold you for plagiarism. I am a man with very fragile emotions. Just now, I was hit by someone. So, do not offend me." Fang Yan grinned and said, "You see, you offended me yesterday and lost the first tea ceremony competition, right? You deserve it." Chapter 79. After a long and unfriendly discussion between Fang Yan and Saburo Fujino, they finally decided on the general rules for the calligraphy competition. First, there was no limit to the language. Second, there was no limit to the content. Third, there was no limit to the style of the calligraphy. Yes, you can write a long poem, or you can write a single word. As long as it was something you were most proficient in, you could participate in the competition. Calligraphy had its own characteristics. Some people's every word was very beautiful, while some people only learned a single word for decades, but that one word was the essence of calligraphy. Could it be that a calligrapher who wrote a single word was not a calligrapher? Obviously not. Today, they were only competing in calligraphy. Therefore, a long piece was calligraphy, and a short piece was calligraphy. A sentence was calligraphy, and a word was calligraphy. The representative from Wuren High School was a boy named Weno Daxiong. He was short and had an honest face. He looked more mature than the other students. He had a mustache on his upper lip that did not match the image of a high school student. Fang Yen paid special attention to this boy's hands. His hands were always clasped together and rarely moved. Steady. Steady hands, steady words. Steadiness was the foundation of writing a good piece of calligraphy. It did not matter if you were pursuing structure or interest. Steadiness was the priority. Only then would the spirit not dissipate. The representative from Rosefinch Secondary was not Huang Haoren. Instead, it was a tall and thin boy named Xiao Pinqing. The boy was about 1.7 meters tall, but he didn't have much flesh on his body. His clothes were empty underneath. If he didn't wear clothes, he would look like a character in the extremely popular Legend of Mir game. Skeleton Elf. Seeing the two contestants standing in front of the table, many people immediately laughed. The appearance of these two people is really unique. Isn't this the real-life version of the two generals Hang and Ha? If the flesh on their bodies were evenly distributed, they could be considered handsome men. Fang Yen also noticed this situation. He thought to himself, in the movies and TV shows, those with beautiful handwriting were also good-looking. In the bamboo forest, under the plum tree, or in the attic in a world of ice and snow, a handsome man dressed in white stood in front of a stone table. At this moment, the sound of the pipa was playing. The man's brush was dyed in ink, and his brush was like a swimming dragon. The sound of the pipa was urgent, and the man's speed increased. When the pipa stopped playing, the man raised his wrist to finish. The environment was elegant, the artistic conception was refined, and the pipa was embellished. On top of that, he was an elegant and graceful young master. Women would be dazzled by him and would love to marry him. Even men would want to rush up and stab him with a knife and scold him for being so pretentious. However, based on what Fang Yen had seen and heard, most of the artists in reality were slovenly. Even if there were some good-looking ones, their scores would be greatly reduced due to their ink-stained clothes or long ungroomed hair and beards. Fang Yen felt that he should be excluded. Unfortunately, he was not qualified to participate in this calligraphy competition. Of course, the students were slightly better off. Although Weno Nobita and Xiao Pinqing both looked very special, they looked very clean and tidy in their school uniforms. The judges for the calligraphy competition were still Lu Chaoga, Nori Matsushima, and Duan Yujun. Duan Yujun gently knocked on the wooden fish in his hand and shouted, "Begin." After saying that, Weno Nobita and Xiao Pinqing did not start writing. They were both grinding the ink, and at the same time, their eyes were sizing up the white paper in front of them, as if there were some mysterious treasures hidden on the white paper. Weno Nobita took the lead and dipped the brush in ink. With the tip of the brush, he wrote on the paper, swallowed the treasured sword and abandoned the famous bow, only to watch this breeze. Because Weno Nobita had written in Japanese, Fang Yen could not understand what this sentence meant. However, from the structure of the words, it could be seen that he had used the famous Japanese style of writing. This was also the style that Fang Yen had said was self-created in Japan. The brushwork was elegant, and the density was just right. The words were connected in a line, like a black landscape painting blooming on the white paper. He has reached a higher level, Fang Yen thought to himself. Even if the other party was a student from the Wuren inspection team, even if this person was his current opponent, Fang Yen was still willing to give him such a high evaluation. Xiao Pinqing was still grinding the ink, as if the inkstone could not be melted. Bang! 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 Duan Yujun gently knocked on the wooden fish in his hand. When the wooden fish struck 60 times, the time limit for this round of the competition was over. At the beginning, everyone was still calm. However, when the wooden fish struck more than 30 times and Ueno Nobita was the first to submit his words, Xiao Pinqing still did not move. The students of Class 9 were a little anxious. They looked at Xiao Pinqing anxiously. However, as they were worried that they would disturb Xiao Pinqing's thoughts, no one said anything to urge Xiao Pinqing to move faster. When the wooden fish struck 46 times, Xiao Pinqing finally dipped the brush in ink. Filial piety. He wrote a big, filial piety, on the white paper in front of him, and it was only one word. He placed the brush in the ink box. His forehead was dripping with sweat, as if he had just run 3 kilometers. He was using the Wei tablet. The strokes were strict, simple, and lively. It was plump and not lacking in rigidity. Good. 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 Fang Yan said good 3 times in a row. Fang Yan also learned calligraphy. To put it bluntly, he was number 1 in calligraphy today at the Cool Breeze Tea House. It was because he learned and studied calligraphy that he could understand the value and brilliance of the word filial piety. This had nothing to do with the teacher-student relationship or the national righteousness. It was only related to the personal feelings of the person who loved calligraphy and the pursuit of art. Just like how a woman would react when she saw a beautiful dress, just like how a man would react when he saw a Ferrari, just like how a foodie would react when he saw the Manchu Han Imperial Feast. When a person saw something unimaginable in his favorite field, he would exclaim in admiration from the bottom of his heart, just like Fang Yan. The Wei tablet was mainly used in the fields of steel carvings, epitaphs, statue inscriptions, and cliff carvings. For generations, Xiao Pinqing's ancestors made a living by polishing tombstones. Xiao Pinqing's family did not have many things, but they had a lot of stones. Since he was very young, his grandfather, his father, and his brother would polish the big stones into square or arched slabs in front of him. Then, they would inscribe the names of their filial sons, grandsons, son-in-law, and nephews on the tombstones according to the list provided by the main family. Xiao Pinqing had been interested in these big stones since he was very young, either because of a long period of nurturing, or because it was hereditary. When he first learned to write, his grandfather threw him a small chisel and a small awl and asked him to hammer out the words he knew on the stones. Because he had been polishing stones since he was young, Xiao Pinqing's hands were very steady. This also nurtured his personality of doing things without restraint and writing one stroke at a time. After years of practice, his Wei tablet had become famous far and wide. In the beginning, a customer came to ask his grandfather, Xiao Chengfa, to carve words. Later, the customer asked his father, Xiao Deshui, to carve words. Later, the customer only asked Xiao Pinqing to carve words. As long as Xiao Pinqing carved words, the customer was willing to pay double the price. The first time Fang Yan discovered Xiao Pinqing's specialty was when he asked his students to imitate Farewell Again Cambridge to write a poem for him. Xiao Pinqing's poem was not worth mentioning, but his words made Fang Yan feel stunned. He had never thought that he could find such a beautiful person among the students. He immediately asked Wang Haoran to find Xiao Pinqing and dragged him along the tree-lined path on campus for more than 10 minutes. He asked all kinds of questions like a fanatical fan and finally understood the special reason for Xiao Pinqing's success. Fang Yan encouraged Xiao Pinqing to continue to work hard and find more inscriptions to study, but to avoid imitating. Because Xiao Pinqing's words were now unique, if he blindly learned the advantages of others, he might lose his own essence. The reason why he asked Xiao Pinqing to study the inscriptions was that he hoped to broaden his horizons and let him have a deeper and more mature understanding of his own words. Xiao Pinqing repeatedly said yes, very happy with Fang Yan's recognition and praise. Later, he asked Fang Yan many times about calligraphy knowledge, and Fang Yan also told him everything he knew. He even went to his grandfather's house to get the imitation version of Yuanhui's epitaph for Xiao Pinqing to appreciate. Xiao Pinqing had written the word filial piety hundreds of thousands of times. He had personally carved it on the tombstone no less than 1,000 times. Filial piety, this was the tradition of Hua Xia, giving people a sense of obedience. No one could defy it. However, filial piety also needed to know how to be flexible, to think of the elderly and think of the elderly's needs. This was not just a word, but a picture of filial piety. Therefore, Fang Yen could not help but say the word good 3 times. Saburo Fujino was very dissatisfied with Fang Yan's behavior and said, "Teacher Fang Yan, this is a kind of cheating behavior and is suspected of misleading the judges. If you do something out of line again, the judges will judge our side as the winner." Even Matsushima Ki was very dissatisfied with Fang Yan's performance. He frowned and said to Lu Chaoga, who was next to him, "Isn't the teacher's performance a little too intense?" What he meant was that Fang Yan was just putting on an act. Wasn't it just one word? Was there a need to be so excited? Fang Yan apologized and said embarrassedly, I'm sorry. I can't help it. I really can't help it. The word is right in front of you. You can judge it freely. From now on, I won't speak anymore." Saburo Fujino sneered and said, "Do you still need to judge? It's already clear." Ueno Daxio's words were smooth like flowing water. Every single word was a rare work of art. The most commendable thing was that his layout was reasonable and the ink was well proportioned. He could be called a master of his generation. Of course, Wuren High School had the upper hand in this round. You only know how to write one word, and you have the nerve to call it calligraphy? Fang Yen was enraged. He cursed, "Bullshit. Don't you have any knowledge? Do you know the subtlety of calligraphy? Can't a single word be called calligraphy? Just this one word is enough to leave you guys behind." Saburo Fujino was dumbfounded. "Didn't you say you won't speak anymore? You liar." Chapter 80. Don't force me to be barbaric, because when I am barbaric, even I am afraid of myself. This sentence was the most suitable to describe Fang Yen. Although Fang Yen was a descendant of the Tai Chi family, he had always thought of himself as a cultured person due to the influence of his grandfather and mother. Drinking tea on a mountain peak, writing on a snowy night. Drinking wine in a bamboo forest, reading poems on a rainy day. This was what a cultured person should do. Beating and scolding was uncivilized and uncultured. But you can't bully me. Even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, let alone a cultured person. Fang Yen was a master of calligraphy, at least he thought so. Although his calligraphy was not as divine as his grandfather's, Lu Gong's, it was still possible for him to reach the heavens. Ueno Nobita's calligraphy was very good. Judging from the layout and the thick ink, it was not a problem for him to reach the heavens. In other words, Fang Yen reluctantly agreed to put Ueno Nobita on the same level as him. But Xiao Pinqing's calligraphy was different. He had entered the attainment of divinity and was slightly better than him, but weaker than his grandfather's, Lu Gong's. When Xiao Pinqing asked Fang Yen for advice on calligraphy, Fang Yen only talked about the idea and not the technique. Because he knew very well that Xiao Pinqing was miles ahead of him in terms of calligraphy like Wei Bei. Especially when Xiao Pinqing wrote the word filial piety with great vigor. His spirit, and soul were all there. He already had the demeanor of a grandmaster. Fang Yen was ecstatic when he saw it and had the urge to eat the word. The novel A Bite of Tongue had whetted one's appetite, and the word good had also opened one's eyes. This word was written in his eyes, in his mouth, and in his heart. But in Saburo Fujino's mouth, it was said that Ueno Nobita was better. How could Fang Yen tolerate this? Fang Yen was so agitated that he cursed, causing everyone to look at each other. The Wuren inspection team was the first to react. Their faces were filled with anger, and they looked like they were going to fight it out with Fang Yen. How can you curse? How uncultured. Did he curse? What was he scolding? Bullshit. This is too hateful. I want him to apologize. I apologize to Fujino-sensei. Matsushima Nori was really angry this time. She looked at Lu Chaoga with a displeased expression and said, "Principal Lu, I need an explanation. I really can't understand how your school treats us like this. Not only is this disrespect towards our people, but it has also involved personal attacks and insults." Lu Chaoga frowned slightly. She also felt that Fang Yen had gone too far by calling someone **T in public. Can't you just curse in secret? Moreover, just as Matsushima Ki had said, if she couldn't give an explanation, this matter would be really difficult to deal with. Wuren Senior High School was a famous school in Japan. They formed a friendship school with Rosefinch Secondary. The cause of this incident was rather complicated and involved many famous people. If this incident wasn't resolved well, Wuren's anger would not be appeased and they would cancel the friendship school with Rosefinch. Then, many people would be punished. At the very least, Lu Chaoga would have to bear the main responsibility. Moreover, if this matter was reported to the Japanese embassy, it could be used by people with ulterior motives. It could escalate to a higher and more serious level. These were all things that Lu Chaoga didn't want to see. Lu Chaoga walked in front of Fang Yen and said, "Sensei Fang Yen, you must give Mr. Fujino an explanation. You must obtain his forgiveness." Fang Yen looked confused. He looked at Saburo Fujino and said, "Mr. Fujino, do I need to give you an explanation? You insulted me." Saburo Fujino was so angry that he stomped his feet. He was a senior teacher at Wuren Senior High School and a famous Japanese researcher of Huaxia culture. Japanese people respected teachers and cultured people very much. Even when the Japanese Prime Minister met him, he was very amiable. He had never been scolded like this in his life. "I still don't quite understand," Fang Yen said. "Which part of my words insulted you? You said I was farting. I am a researcher of Huaxia culture. Don't think that I don't understand the meaning of those two words." Seeing Fang Yen acting like a fool, Saburo Fujino became even more furious. "Yes, I said the two words farting," Fang Yen admitted. "Since that is the case, what else do you have to say?" "But I did not say that you were farting," Fang Yen said. "I am saying that someone was farting. Could it be that you didn't smell a foul stench just now? You are just being unreasonable. You were obviously talking about me. That fart just now was from you?" "It was not me," Saburo Fujino said angrily. He hated being wronged the most. "If it was not you, then who was it? How would I know who it was?" Only after Saburo Fujino shouted did he realize that he had gone off topic. "I am saying that after you said the two words farting, you immediately started talking to me. Clearly, you are attacking me. You see, you misunderstood me again," Fang Yen said. "Mr. Fujino, you are a guest from afar. Our Huaxia is a country of etiquette. How could I possibly curse at someone? The matter is like this. Back then, I smelled a foul stench and thought that you were farting. However, I felt that it would be indecent to say such a thing. Additionally, it would embarrass you. Thus, I quickly changed the topic. Perhaps there is a problem with my ability to express myself. Additionally, the change in topic was not natural enough. That is why you misunderstood me. If that is the case, I sincerely apologize to you now." "I was not the one who did it," Saburo Fujino was on the verge of shouting. How could he not be able to explain such a thing? Fang Yen looked at Saburo with a stunned expression and said, "Even if that is the case, there is no need for you to be so agitated." Lu Chaoga stood by the side and watched with cold eyes. She thought to herself that this was not a bad way to resolve the issue. Fang Yen would certainly not be willing to apologize to Fang Yen. However, if he did not apologize and Fang Yen had indeed scolded someone, it would be hard to explain to the other side. Fortunately, the culture of Huaxia was extensive and profound. A single word could be interpreted in countless ways. Seeing that the two of them were unable to come to a conclusion after exchanging a few words, Fujino Saburo would only be at a disadvantage if they continued to argue. Thus, Fujino Saburo could only say, since both contestants have finished writing, let's have a proper evaluation. That is what I am thinking as well, Lu Chaoga quickly followed up. To be able to resolve this issue, she was more than happy to do so. Matsushima Ki glanced at Fang Yen and said, Teacher Fang Yen, since you understand calligraphy, then you should be the one to evaluate these two pieces of calligraphy. How can I accept that? I am not one of the judges, Fang Yen said with a smile. It is better for the judges to evaluate. You guys are the experts. You can evaluate it first. We will decide the final outcome, Matsushima Ki said. What he meant was that you can state your opinion. Whether you accept it or not, it is up to us. Since Principal Matsushima has invited me, then I will respectfully accept, Fang Yen said. He first walked to the front of Ueno Nobita's words and said very frankly, I don't understand Japanese, so I don't understand what this sentence means. Who can translate it for me? Swallowing the precious sword and abandoning the famous bow, only to watch the cool breeze, someone said aloud. Fang Yen read it and said, good words. Good words. We often say that a good horse needs a good saddle. In my eyes, Ueno Nobita's words are a good horse, and this sentence is a good saddle. Only by matching the words can the mood be more obvious. If he wrote, Ueno Nobita was here, no matter how beautiful his words are, he will lose a lot of points. Isn't this the case? Fang Yan's words were interesting, and everyone laughed. Only to watch the cool breeze, this sentence is very good. It gives people a feeling of giving up fame and fortune, forgetting the troubles of the secular world, and only listening to the wind and admiring the moon. Ueno Nobita's words are exquisite and elegant. Every stroke is connected into a line, like a crescent moon, a gust of wind. It makes people feel relaxed and happy. Ueno Nobita heard his classmate's translation and bowed slightly to Fang Yen to express his gratitude. When he was grinding the ink, he thought of this sentence and considered writing it as a crescent moon, a gust of wind. Fang Yen went straight to the heart and expressed his intention completely. He was indeed an expert in calligraphy. Fang Yen smiled at Ueno Nobita, looked at him and said, however, this calligraphy has a fatal flaw. That is, it is too rouge. Ueno Nobita, you only focus on the form, but not the spirit. You only express the cool breeze, but what about the words swallowing the precious sword and abandoning the famous bow? Without the beginning, how can there be the end? Without the beginning, how can there be the end? Ueno Nobita's eyes widened, and his face was full of shock. If I'm not wrong, Ueno Nobita learned calligraphy from a female teacher, right? Fang Yen asked. After listening to Fang Yan's words, Ueno Nobita nodded and then bowed 90 degrees to Fang Yen. He learned calligraphy from his mother, whose surname was Kono. She was the descendant of Kono Shirnin, one of the three geniuses who appeared in the calligraphy world when Toyotomi Hideyoshi unified the world in the Peach Mountain era. The world also called those three people the Three Strokes of Kwan Yong. Even the teachers and classmates at school didn't know who his mother was, and he had never mentioned it to anyone. However, Fang Yen, Hua Xiao's teacher, saw through it at a glance. Fang Yen helped Ueno Nobita up and said with a smile, if it was that lady who wrote this calligraphy, I would give her a higher evaluation. And what I said about the excessive rouge is not a weakness, but an advantage. Because this is a woman's characteristic. However, Ueno Nobita can't do it. You are a man. If you deliberately imitate that teacher's writing style, you will make a fundamental mistake. There is a difference between men and women. Women can't learn men's boldness, and men can't write women's gentleness and exquisiteness. No matter how hard you try. Am I right? A word is worth 1,000 gold. Ueno Nobita bowed again, thanking Fang Yen for his selfless guidance. He finally found the shortcomings of his calligraphy, which had a profound impact on his future development. Chapter 81. Calligraphy was like Buddhism, it was about enlightenment. Ueno Nobita's calligraphy was indeed beautiful, but he could feel that he had reached a bottleneck. He had reached the end of the road, but he could not find any other way out. They either stood still or walked back the way they came. Ueno Nobita did not want to see either. Today, Fang Yan's words had awakened him from his confusion and allowed him to have a clear understanding of the path ahead of him. He had found an exit and could gallop on another road. Was this not the happiest thing? The two bows represented two completely different meanings. The first was a courtesy to thank Fang Yan for his praise. The second time was filled with sincere gratitude and respect. Every word was worth 1,000 taels of gold. Seeing Fang Yan conquer Ueno Nobita with just a few words, Saburo Fujino's heart broke. What was wrong with these students? Why did they just give up and surrender so easily? What did I teach you all? Have you forgotten the samurai spirit? He had already lost the first round of the tea ceremony competition. If he were to lose the second round of the calligraphy competition, how could he face his Japanese parents? Saburo Fujino did not care about Ueno Nobita's attitude towards Fang Yan and said, Ueno Nobita's calligraphy is flawed, but is Rosefinch's student's calligraphy not flawed? Matsushima Ki also spoke up, that's right. Fang Yan sensei, you just commented on Ueno Nobita's calligraphy. Now, you should also comment on Rosefinch's student's filial piety. Of course. Fang Yan nodded. To be honest, Xiao Pinqing wrote the word filial piety with the intention of using a trick. Because this is indeed the best word he has ever written. Of course, this is the mentality of any contestant. Ueno Nobita wrote swallow the sword and abandon the bow. Did he not have the intention of using a trick? Yes. In his heart, he would naturally feel that these were the few words he had written the best. Huaxia culture is broad and profound. Countless people were researching, countless people were learning and imitating. Fujino, sensei in front of us was also a learner and researcher of Chinese culture. He studied poetry, songs, zither, chess, poetry, painting, the Book of Changes and the 8 trigrams. He studied everything he thought was worth studying. However, in my opinion, this research is only on the surface. It can't touch the core. What is the real culture of Huaxia? It was a traditional virtue that had been passed down for thousands of years. In 7 words, they were loyalty, filial piety, benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trustworthiness. These things could not be seen, nor could they be heard, but they were deeply embedded in the blood and marrow of every Huaxia citizen. As long as people were alive, they were alive. When a person dies, there will be countless successors. Filial piety is the most important of all virtues. Filial piety is a word that understands the shape and sound. The shape of this character was very ingenious. The upper half was half of the character Lao, while the lower half was the full character Z. The previous generation and the next generation merged into one. The son inherits the father, and the son can inherit his parents and follow his wishes. Fang Yan walked to the front of the bookshelf, pointed at Xiao Pinqing's calligraphy and said, let's look at the upper half of Xiao Pinqing's filial piety first. It is simple and unadorned, and the ink is vigorous. Doesn't it look like an old man with rich experience who dedicated his life to his children? Hearing Fang Yan's words, everyone admired it seriously. They really saw something different in this character. Kindness, sincerity, dedication, selflessness, and sadness. Fang Yan pointed at the lower half of the character and said, the old man is old, so he has a new son. Look at this upper half and the lower half, but only half of the character, Lao, is left. Where did the other half go? It was given to their children. Isn't that how parents are? The first half of their life is for themselves, and the second half is for their children. Just like the song, Where Has All Time Gone, sings, you're old before you can enjoy your youth. You've had children for a lifetime, and your mind is full of children's tears and laughter. Xiao Pinqing Z is vigorous and delicate, representing the prosperity of his son, and also representing the healthy growth of his son. The layout of this filial piety is grand, and the structure is clear. The ink is thick when it should be thick, and light when it should be light. The brush is heavy when it should be heavy, and light when it should be light. It has feelings, temperament, and structure. This is why I think Xiao Pinqing's calligraphy is better than Ueno Nobita's. Thank you, Mr. Fang, Xiao Pinqing said gratefully. Fang Yan waved his hand, looked at Lu Chaoga, Matsushima Ji, and Duan Yujun, and said, "Judges, I'm done with my comments. It's up to you to decide who is better and who is worse." Lu Chaoga and Matsushima Ji looked at each other. Lu Chaoga spoke first and said, "Principal Matsushima, you are the guest, so you should comment first." Matsushima Ji refused and said, "Mr. Duan should start first." Duan Yujun stood between the two writing tables, looked at Ueno Nobita's calligraphy, and then looked at Xiao Pinqing's calligraphy, looking hesitant. With so many people watching, the honest Duan Yujun was embarrassed to choose his family's calligraphy directly. "To be honest, both works are good," Duan Yujun said. "Both are good. It's much better than my handwriting." Everyone laughed and said, "Boss Duan, everyone knows that their calligraphy is better than yours. The key is whose calligraphy is better." "I choose filial piety," Duan Yujun said. "Not to mention anything else, this word makes me feel close." Can an unfilial person still be human? Clatter, the students of Rosefinch Secondary applauded. Now one of the judges had turned to Xiao Pinqing, and Xiao Pinqing's victory was in sight. Matsushima Ji asked Lu Chaoga to comment again, and Lu Chaoga said without hesitation, "I choose filial piety. I like the feeling of a father and son being connected. I sensed a very deep emotion from this piece of calligraphy. This feeling." Lu Chaoga looked sad and said, "It's been a long time since we last met." Duan Yujun chose Xiao Pinqing's filial piety, and Lu Chaoga also chose Xiao Pinqing's filial piety. No matter how Matsushima Ji voted, Xiao Pinqing was already the winner of this calligraphy competition. Of course, this also had something to do with the judging system. Because Duan Yujun and Lu Chaoga were both Huaxia's people, they would be biased towards the Rosefinch Secondary contestants. It was human nature. Matsushima Ji sighed softly and did not speak. Ueno Nobita walked to Matsushima Ji and bowed deeply to him. Then he raised his head and said, "Teacher, please grant me a request." "What is it?" Matsushima Ji asked. "Give this vote to my opponent," Ueno Daxio said. "I can feel the feelings he has when he wrote this calligraphy. I focus on the form, and he takes both the spirit and the form into consideration. In terms of calligraphy cultivation, I am not as good as him." Matsushima Ji pondered for a long time, then patted Ueno Nobita on the shoulder and said, "Ueno Nobita, I promise you." "Thank you, teacher." "I'm sorry." "I'm not." Ueno Nobita smiled honestly. "Teacher, you can't imagine what I have gained from this trip to Huaxia. I can't wait to grind the ink and write. I can't wait to go back and tell my teacher, my mother, that I want to take a completely different path from her. She is herself, and I can't be her. I can only surpass her." "Good. Very good." Matsushima Ji also smiled happily. "Ueno Nobita, congratulations." "Thank you, teacher." Ueno Nobita bowed again. Matsushima Ji looked back at Lu Chaoga and said, "This vote is for filial piety." Clatter, the students all spontaneously applauded. Not only the students of Rosefinch Secondary, but even the teachers and students of Wuren Secondary also applauded. In the second match, Rosefinch Secondary won again. It was lunchtime, and Duan Yujun insisted on inviting the teachers and students of both schools for lunch. This time, Lu Chaoga strongly refused, saying that she had already disturbed them today. The school would be responsible for the lunch, and the school had specially allocated funds to entertain the delegation of Wuren. Both sides agreed that the third fencing match would be held at 3:00 in the afternoon. After lunch, the students of the delegation would return to the hotel to rest for a while. In the dessert shop at the entrance of the campus, Fang Yan and Tangqing sat opposite each other. Tangqing held a cup of iced lemon green tea in his hand, his eyes looking around without focus, looking very bored. Student Tangqing, have you thought about it? Fang Yan asked. Teacher Fang Yan, I have answered you several times. I'm not going. I have no interest in that kind of thing, Tangqing said impatiently. What's your reason for refusing? I'm not interested. Why not? I don't like it. Student Tangqing, the tea ceremony, calligraphy, and fencing matches between us and the Wuren delegation have attracted the attention of the entire class and even the entire school. Although friendship comes first, competition comes second, everyone hopes to win these 3 matches. Because everyone knows that winning or losing not only concerns the school's dignity, but also the dignity of our entire Huaxia. If we lose these 3 matches, will our Huaxia lose its dignity? Tangqing sneered. Student Tangqing, I know you think this is a small matter, and you think that winning or losing doesn't matter. But I don't think so. We should do our best in any match. We can't easily give up any opportunity. We have to win, and we have to keep winning. We have to win our dignity, and we have to win our confidence. We have to win our own confidence, and we have to take away their confidence. I want them to have no chance of winning in every confrontation with us. I want them to be wary of us every time they fight us. The national defense of a country not only depends on the strength of the army, but also the invincible will and ambition of every Huaxia person. Fang Yan looked at Tangqing with sincere eyes and said, Student Tangqing, come out. Come out and help me win this match, and help yourself win this match. Chapter 82. Tangqing was silent, staring at Fang Yan with a burning gaze. If I don't agree, does that mean I'm not patriotic? Tangqing asked. Fang Yan was taken aback and said, I hope you can do this, it has nothing to do with patriotism or not. In that case, I still won't agree. Tangqing said with a sneer. Teacher Fang Yan, why should I agree? Why should I agree? You made me kneel to you in front of the whole class, you made me kneel to you in front of Qinitian. Now, just because of a few words you said, just because of your bluff, I have to stand up and work for you? When you did that, did you think about my feelings? Did you think about how I'll face the strange looks of the students in the future? Did you think about what kind of gossip I'll encounter in the future? What's more hateful is, did you think about how I'll pass the harsh scrutiny of Qinitian? You can have whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. Everyone in the world has to revolve around you. Do you think you're the hero of a novel? Teacher Fang Yan, I'm not an idiot. I won't do it, I won't do it. No matter how extravagant your words are to make people's blood boil, I won't agree to it. I just want to see you lose. You can easily take away other people's dignity, why can't others take away your dignity? Anyway, this bet is between you and that Japanese teacher, what does it have to do with us? Tangqing took a sip of the iced lemon tea, moistened his throat, and said, besides, aren't you very good at fighting? If you're so good, can you go by yourself? If you go, I guarantee that no one can beat you. Fang Yan nodded and said, that's true. If I go, who on their side will be a match for me? But, I can't do that. My identity is a teacher. If I were to fight, even if I won, they wouldn't be convinced. They would even think that our school doesn't have any outstanding students. If there's really no other choice, they would only send a teacher to fight. I can bear this misunderstanding and humiliation, but I can't tolerate my students being belittled and belittled by them. Mr. Fang is really great. Tangqing had a conflict with Fang Yan on the first day he entered class 9. So he had a grudge against him and was also on guard against him. Therefore, he didn't believe a single word that Fang Yan said. Besides, Fang Yan had already won 2 rounds in a row. If he won the 3rd round, wouldn't Qinitian think that he was different? Tangqing was having a headache now. He didn't understand what kind of feelings Qinitian had for Fang Yan. It was impossible to say that it was love. He knew that a girl like Qinitian would not easily fall in love with any man. If that wasn't the case, why did she treat Fang Yan differently from others? Tangqing used to think that his competitors were students. He didn't expect that even teachers would be included. It's really tiring to have a girlfriend who is too outstanding. Tangqing thought in his heart. He felt like he didn't want to love anymore. Fang Yan waved his hand, looking carefree as if he had nothing to do with fame and fortune. It doesn't matter if I'm great or not. I'm just doing something that I can do. They sent a student to fight, and we can only send one student to fight. We not only have to win, but we also have to win them to be convinced. We have to convince them with force, and then move them with virtue. Slapping them twice and making them think that we're good people. Don't think too much. I'm not talking about you. You're my student. How can I hurt you like this? You can refuse. It's your right. No one has the right to interfere. Fang Yan sighed softly and said, however, what you said just now made me understand some of my shortcomings in my work. I'm still too young. I don't have rich experience as a student. If I changed the solution at that time, would the effect be better? This is something that I need to reflect and improve. Tangqing looked at Fang Yan in surprise. This guy is so easy to talk to. Is he indirectly apologizing to me? Do you think an apology can buy people's hearts? Impossible. Tangqing said. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean to apologize. I'm thinking, if I slapped you twice on the spot that day? Or if I directly knocked you down to the ground? Or... Fang Yan. Tangqing shouted angrily. Is there anyone who begs people like this? Don't be angry. Let me finish, Fang Yan tried to persuade him. Isn't it better to be angry together? If I do that, you'll lose face and dignity. There won't be so many little girls around you anymore. The school hunk will no longer be you. Isn't that better? Fang Yan, don't go too far. Tangqing clenched his fists so hard that cracking sounds could be heard. Fang Yan looked at Tangqing's fists and said, Tangqing, I can't fight the Japanese student, but can't I hit you? You can't beat me at all. You know this better than anyone else. If you were me, what would you do when your own student takes the initiative to provoke you and humiliate you in front of everyone, or do something even more miserable? Pretend as if nothing had happened. Before I made you kneel, even if I wanted to think so, you might not agree to do it, right? I don't do anything. Kneel when you say so. Let you slap my face when you say so. Have whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. Have everyone in the world revolve around you? Do you think you're the male lead in a novel? Tangqing was furious. Fang Yan actually dared to repeat his own words. This shameless plagiarist. There's a cause and there's an effect. Revenge must be taken. I'm a teacher and you're a student. I welcome people with a smile, but you want to show off your uniqueness as soon as you come in. This is something that no teacher can accept, right? If you hate me because of this, I can only say that your thinking is too immature. If you're really mature, you should work hard to learn and beat me up. Look, you can't argue with me, and you don't dare to beat me up. Someone like you has the nerve to be praised as the school hunk? If I were born 2 or 3 years later, what do you think would happen to you and Tangqing in Rosefinch Secondary? You'd just be a minion following behind me. As a teacher, I firmly oppose campus romance. The most important thing for a student is to learn. Of course, I know you may not be willing to listen to me. Qi Nitian stood up and won the tea ceremony. Xiao Pinqing stood up and won the calligraphy competition. Tangqing, if others know your choice, what do you think they will think of you? Do you think it's shameful for me to ask you to kneel down in public? Fang Yan sneered. That's not it. Far from it. Soon you'll know what kind of behavior is the most shameful thing. I'm not trying to put a label on you, nor am I trying to oppress you with my power. Tangqing, I don't like you, and sometimes I even hate you. However, there's something I have to tell you. People living in this world must understand the true meaning of the phrase, a wise man's words are a fearful thing. This is my good intention, I hope you can accept it. After saying so much, let's review the first question. Tangqing, are you willing to stand up and accept the challenge? Tangxing's mouth was slightly open, unsure of how to answer the question. Fang Yan's fingers gently tapped the surface of the table twice and said, I've been sitting in front of you for a long time, but you've never offered to buy me a glass of fruit juice. I'm also too embarrassed to buy it myself. That would make me look like a failure as a teacher. Tangxing, in terms of respecting your teacher, you're really bad at it. I need to deduct your conduct points to remind you. After saying that, Fang Yan got up and left. Tangxing stared at the half-filled cup of iced lemon tea in his hand, dumbfounded. Due to the 2 losses in the morning, Saburo Fujino was no longer as arrogant when he saw Fang Yan. His attitude was also not as tough. He took the initiative to greet Fang Yan and said with a smile, Teacher Fang Yan, today's weather is quite good. Fang Yan raised his head and looked at the gloomy sky. He thought to himself that it might rain soon. Autumn in Flower City was a rainy season. Moreover, there were many showers. 1 minute, the sun was shining brightly, and in the blink of an eye, it would be raining cats and dogs. Naturally, Fang Yan did not reject Saburo's good intentions. He said, Indeed. Today's weather is quite good. Friendship first, competition second. This trip to Huaxia has given us a rich harvest. I believe that through this series of exchange activities, we will be able to deepen the friendship between our 2 schools, allowing the students to promote each other and improve together. This will allow them to become useful talents for society and humanity as a whole. Isn't this the real purpose of us holding these exchange activities? Yes. That is the case. Fang Yan nodded his head. That is what we think as well. Then, the afternoon match, should we cancel the afternoon match? Fang Yan asked. Of course, if Teacher Fujino strongly requests it, we have no objections. After all, we must respect the true thoughts of our guests. Besides, winning 2 matches in a row in the morning has already made us feel embarrassed. The leaders of the school and I have been hesitating. For this 3rd match, should we continue to win? If we were to do so, would it be a breach of etiquette? Etiquette and face, there are times when it is difficult to choose. However, Teacher Fujino's suggestion has solved our problem. So, I will go report this to the school leaders. Is that all? Chapter 83. Some people would make you fall in love with them at first sight. Some people would make you want to beat them up. Clearly, in Saburo Fujino's eyes, Fang Yan belonged to the latter category. Saburo Fujino had challenged Fang Yan during his class. Even though he had hidden his trump card, Fang Yan had still won 2 matches in a row. This caused him to lose face. His heart was filled with grievance and discomfort. What caused him to vomit blood was the fact that the students who lost the match were praising Huaxia's teachers and students. Be it Chiba Keiru or Ueno Nobuo, both of them had expressed their admiration for Huaxia's culture and spirit. They had also spoken highly of their opponents, saying that they had learned a lot from them. What kind of behavior was this? This was a slap to the face. He had just shouted out the slogan, Tang and Song cultures in Japan, and they had been conquered by Huaxia's culture. Do they still want to be compatriots? Saburo Fujino was a smart person. He knew that he could not go against the general trend. Since both his teachers and students had a favorable impression of Huaxia's culture and Rosefinch Secondary, it would not be appropriate for him to be the only one hostile towards them. That would only cause others to think that he was narrow-minded and an anomaly. He was prepared to change his battle strategy. He would treat his enemies with a gentle and friendly attitude. However, he would show no mercy during the match. Only the victor would have the right to make fun of others. Was that not the case? He had already made up his mind. After the experts he sent out had slaughtered Rosefinch's students until they were crying for their parents, he would go and have a talk with Fang Yan. His expression would surely be quite ugly, right? They had already lost 2 matches. They were hoping to win back some face in the 3rd match. How could they cancel the match? If they were to cancel the match, then they would have no chance at all. Additionally, others would say something like this: Wu Ren is afraid of Rosefinch Secondary's victory and no longer dares to continue the match. This result was even harder to accept than losing the third match. This was Wu Ren's shame. It was also Saburo's shame. He would never allow such a thing to happen. Seeing Fang Yen turn around to report to the leader, Saburo Fujino grabbed his arm and said, "Fang Yen, sensei. Fang Yen, sensei, you misunderstood my words. I have no intention of canceling the match. I mean, when will our afternoon match begin? Where is the venue? Not canceling the match?" Fang Yen turned to look at Saburo Fujino. Not canceling the match? Saburo Fujino turned to look at Saburo. Saburo Fujino suddenly realized something. A smile appeared on his face as he said, "Could it be that teacher Fang Yen wants to cancel the competition? How is that possible?" Fang Yen naturally had to deny it. "I've already told you about our concerns. We don't want our 3 consecutive wins to affect the deep friendship between our 2 schools. Of course, this will also affect Wu Ren's confidence. As the host of this event, we have to think more comprehensively and in the long term. To what we do and do things, we need to finish. Is that not the case?" Saburo Fujino looked at Fang Yen and said with a smile, "I have heard that Rosefinch does not have a tradition of practicing swordsmanship. Could it be that Sensei Fang Yen wants to invite an expert from outside to accept the challenge? If that is the case, then we will have to surrender. This is Huaxia. If you want to find 3 to 5 experts, it will not be an issue." Fang Yan's face turned serious and he said, "Our Rosefinch does not have a tradition of practicing swordsmanship. However, that does not mean that our school does not have any experts. Sensei Fujino, you can insult me, but you cannot belittle my students. In view of your unkind words, I have decided to challenge you. Let's duel the 2 of us in the 3rd round of the fencing competition. I am just a scholar without the strength to even truss a chicken. However, the integrity of a scholar does not allow me to take even half a step back. Life or death is up to fate. I am willing to sign a blood contract with you." Listening to Fang Yan's words, Saburo Fujino's heart was slightly moved. Fang Yen was taller than him, but he was not as big as him. Additionally, he was someone who paid more attention to training himself and had learned a few moves of Taekwondo. If he could openly beat up Fang Yen in front of everyone, he would be able to vent his anger and his students would certainly be inspired. However, he quickly rejected this tempting idea. After 2 days of contact, he felt that Fang Yen was a very cunning fellow. For him to take the initiative to challenge him meant that he must have a plan in mind. If he were to agree to his proposal, wouldn't he be walking right into his trap? I am not that stupid, Saburo Fujino thought to himself. He looked at Fang Yen with a straight face and said, "This is just my personal concern. I do not have any intention of belittling Rosefinch's students. In my eyes, Rosefinch's students are very outstanding and lovable. I am afraid that some teachers would only covet the glory of victory and bring in experts from outside the school to participate in the competition. In this way, even if they were to win the competition, the students would be disappointed. Face projects will only harm themselves and others. Just say it, do you want to accept my challenge or not?" Fang Yen said impatiently. "I am a teacher. This kind of matter should naturally be handled by my students. I believe in them, just like how they are willing to believe in me," Saburo Fujino said. "This is a show for the students. I will not snatch away the opportunity that belongs to them." Fang Yen looked at Saburo Fujino in surprise and said, "I thought only our school's director Li Mingxiang would be able to say such high-sounding words. It turns out that Teacher Fujino is even better than Director Li. What did you say?" "Teacher Fujino, you understand what I mean," Fang Yen smiled. "We are both language teachers. Our ability to understand words is deeper than others. Isn't that right?" Saburo Fujino felt like hitting someone again. He said, "There is no point in talking so much. Let's get ready for the competition. Our team members have already been chosen. What about your team members? They have already been chosen, Fang Yan said confidently. The kendo competition will be held in the school's taekwondo dojo. Like the art club, calligraphy club, literature club and gaming club, this was a club established by several students who loved taekwondo. Later, as the number of students participating increased, the school opened a dojo specifically for the taekwondo club to provide training for the students. When the members of Wuren's delegation saw the logo of the taekwondo dojo, a strange expression appeared on their faces. Saburo Fujino glanced at Fang Yan and said with a smile, "Teacher Fang Yan, could it be that the people of Huaxia are more committed to promoting the development of taekwondo? Huaxia preserves its own unique cultural characteristics and is also willing to accept some foreign cultures. As long as it is of good quality and beneficial to our citizens, we are happy to accept and promote it," Fang Yan said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. "Regardless of what kind of culture it is, it will only become a part of our Huaxia country and cannot replace the mainstream culture. Some people like to eat steak and spaghetti, but have you seen any Huaxia family that eats steak and spaghetti every day? Rice, steamed buns, stir-fried vegetables and stew are our common dishes. We have such confidence." Saburo Fujino smiled and no longer said anything. He knew that he was no match for Fang Yan when it came to bickering. The taekwondo dojo was not closed to outsiders due to the competition today. Therefore, many students in Daoist attire could be seen practicing inside. Saburo Fujino pursed his lips when he saw the moves of the students and did not say anything. The president of the taekwondo club, Luo Yi, walked over and took the initiative to greet Lu Chaoga. He smiled and said, "Principal Lu, the venue has been prepared. You can start at any time." Luo Yi was a high school student and an influential figure in the school. He was very familiar with some of the school's leaders and teachers. Her attitude towards Lu Xiaoga was one of respect and intimacy, unlike the other students who were afraid and reserved. Lu Xiaoga nodded and said, "Thank you for your hard work. Principal Lu, you are too polite. We are also a part of Rosefinch Secondary and should do our part for the school." Luo Yi glanced at the Wuren inspection team and thought to himself, "I wonder if there are any experts on their side. I hope that the competition will not be too disappointing." "Chiba Haomu, step forward," Saburo Fujino shouted in Japanese. As soon as he finished speaking, a short boy wearing a Japanese school uniform walked out from the crowd. The boy was about 1.6 meters tall. When he walked, his body swayed from side to side. His posture looked a little strange, but his steps were light and natural. His footsteps were light and quick, and his white cloth shoes made almost no sound when he stepped on the wooden floor. The boy had a cute baby face and the shape of his face was somewhat similar to Chiba Haomu's. Fang Yan looked at Chiba Haomu's expression and noticed that when she looked at Chiba Haomu, there was a gentle smile on her face. They should be siblings, Fang Yan guessed. Chiba Haomu noticed Fang Yan's gaze and nodded at him with a smile. He did not know if it was just a greeting or an affirmation that his guess was correct. Fang Yan smiled and quickly turned his head away. If someone with ulterior motives saw this, they would think that he was seducing a Japanese student. Chiba Haomu's brother naturally has the surname Chiba as well, Fang Yan thought to himself. He felt that the surname was somewhat familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. North Star One Blade style? These shiny words suddenly popped up in Fang Yan's mind. North Star One Blade style was a very popular swordsmanship school in Japan during the late Edo period. Its founder was Chiba Shusaku, the first master of the Chiba family and the founder of North Star One Blade style. North Star One Blade style set up the Black Martial Dojo in Nyanbashi, Edo. Together with Kishin Mishiryu's Scholar Gakuen Dojo and Shinnoryu's Warrior Training Dojo, they were known as the three great dojos of Edo. Didn't that old drunkard in his family specifically mention North Star One Blade style when he was explaining the world of swordsmanship? Their founder's surname was Chiba. So, what relationship did Chiba Haomu and her brother have with the Chiba family? Chapter 84. Fong Yan's guess was right. Chiba Kaoru and Chiba Haomu were really siblings, and they were indeed the descendants of Chiba Josua. The North Star Ito-ryu was a famous Japanese sword technique that had been passed down for hundreds of years. As a girl, Chiba Kaori was more inclined to enjoy the visual and sensory aspects of the tea ceremony. Chiba Takashi was a male descendant of the Chiba family. He had been trained by the family in swordsmanship and physical fitness since he was young. Both of them studied at Wuren High School, a famous private school in Japan. Both of them were well-known figures in the school. Chiba Kaori was gentle, beautiful, and had an outstanding temperament. She was also the president of the school's tea ceremony club. She was the undisputed goddess of the school. Her status in Wuren Senior High School was similar to that of Chinitian in Rosefinch. As for Chiba Haomu, he was adorable and skilled in swordsmanship. He was very popular with both boys and girls, and he had a group of hardcore supporters. This time, Saburo Fujino had taken the initiative to issue a challenge. Additionally, he had declared that he wanted to compete with Fong Yan in the way of tea, calligraphy, and fencing. Truth be told, he had dug a big hole for Fong Yan. Saburo Fujino had a clear understanding of the strength of his team members. They had a world-class tea master, a calligraphy master, and a kendo expert. If they were to compete in these three areas, wouldn't they be able to win 3 out of 3 matches? They would be able to trample Huaxia's team into the mud, leaving not even their bones behind. He did not guess the beginning correctly, nor could he guess the ending correctly. Chiba Kaori, whom he had high hopes for, had lost. Ueno Nobita had also lost. Now, he had placed all his hopes on Chiba Haomu. Teacher. Chiba Takashi stood before Saburo Fujino. Saburo Fujino patted Chiba Haomu's shoulder. He wanted to say something, but there was an inexplicable sadness in his heart. After a long while, he calmed down a little and said in a deep voice, "Please win." Chiba Haomu nodded with a smile and said, "I understand, teacher." Chiba Haomu understood. All the members of the Wuren inspection team understood. They had already lost 2 rounds. If they lost the last round as well, then they would be shaved bald by Huaxia. This was a great humiliation. Hence, the other students of Wuren University gathered around them. Good martial arts, good luck. Good fight. You must win. Chinya is good at martial arts. We believe in you. Chiba Sun walked up to Chiba Haomu and smiled silently. Just do your best. No, sister, I want to win. Chiba Haomu also smiled. His smile was as bright as the sun. What an adorable boy. Win back what you lost. The smile on Chiba Kaori's face gradually faded. She seriously looked into Chiba Haomu's eyes and said, "Little brother, don't mess around. This is war," Chiba Haomu said. Sister, there must be a winner and a loser in a war. If it wasn't like that, then the battle between martial artists would have lost its meaning. But, sister, no buts. Our family motto is courage and wisdom. Without hesitation. Saburo Fujino looked at Fong Yan and asked, "Teacher Fong Yan, our team members have stepped forward. How long are you going to hide your contestants?" Hua. A wooden door was pushed open from the inside. Tangsheng, dressed in a white Taoist robe, walked out with a wooden sword in his hand. He said in a clear voice, "I've been waiting for you for a long time." Clatter, the students of Rosefinch Secondary immediately applauded. Tangsheng is so handsome. His outfit is really not bad. As expected of the school hunk. I can't help but admire him. I knew it was Tangsheng. I heard that Tangsheng's kung fu is very powerful. It had to be said that this kid, Tangsheng, was praised by the girls of Rosefinch Secondary as the school hunk. He really did have some skill. Not to mention his dazzling results and outstanding skills, just the way he walked out in the white Taoist robe of the Taekwondo club while holding a wooden sword gave people the feeling of a handsome and elegant young man. His slender figure, exquisite facial features, and the natural arrogance he exuded made him really attractive to young girls. Fang Yan walked in front of Tangqing and said with a smile, "Have you thought it through?" "I didn't come for you," Tangqing said. "If you think that I'm participating in this competition because of you, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. It doesn't matter who you came for. As long as you stand here today, you will be my good student." Fang Yan patted Tangqing's shoulder. Tangqing frowned. In the end, he did not slap away Fang Yan's restless palm in front of everyone. The members of both sides were in place. Tangqing had already changed his attire and was ready to fight. Fang Yan looked at Saburo Fujino and said, "Let your team members go in and change their clothes." Saburo Fujino said a few words to Chiba Haomu. Chiba Haomu nodded and followed Luo Yi to the changing room where the new Taoist robes were prepared. When Chiba Haomu came out wearing a black Taoist robe and holding a wooden sword of his choice, the match was about to begin. Luo Yi was the president of the Taekwondo club and the only judge for this competition. Fencing was different from other competitions. The winner and loser were clear at a glance. Therefore, there was no need for too many judges to vote. Luo Yi stood between the two of them and said in English that they could understand, "Do you want to wear protective gear?" Both Tangqing and Chiba Haomu shook their heads and refused. They did not have the habit of wearing protective gear. Since both sides have chosen not to wear protective gear, then I would like to propose 3 rules. First, you are not allowed to stab your opponent's vital parts. Second, the winning side is not allowed to kill anyone. Most importantly, when I say stop, you must stop immediately. He was afraid that the two of them would fight to the death. If that happened, things would become difficult to deal with. Although they were both using wooden swords, their fists could kill people. Not to mention, the wooden swords in the hands of these experts were not much different from real iron swords. Both Tangqing and Chiba Haomu nodded to show that they understood. Luo Yi took 3 steps back and said, "Members from both sides, salute." Tangqing and Chiba Haomu bowed to each other and performed the traditional etiquette. "Ready!" Luo Yi shouted. After the two of them had finished their preparations, Luo Yi shouted, "Ready!" Chiba Haomu was dressed in a black robe. He raised the wooden sword in his hand high, as though he wanted to cleave his opponent from head to toe. This was his usual starting stance, and it was also the stance that could best showcase his swordsmanship. Moreover, this move of his had a very famous name. It was called Silent Victory. The so-called silent duel meant that after the battle began, the victor would be decided before the bamboo blades in their hands struck each other. The other party didn't even have the chance to hit their own side, much less win. This move was imparted to the famous swordsman Takiyanagi Asashiro. Takiyanagi Asashiro was Chiba Haomu's opponent, but Chiba Haomu liked Takiyanagi Asashiro's fighting style very much. He had especially learned it. Tangqing was dressed in white. He looked relaxed and casual as he sized up the Rosefinch secondary team. The match was about to begin, but Chinitian hadn't arrived yet. This made him feel both regretful and disappointed. One had to know that before he decided to participate in this competition, he had specially sent a message to Chinitian. Could it be that Chinitian's phone ran out of battery and was powered off? There were 3 ways to attack in Sword Dao: Killer Sword, Killer Move, and Killing Aura. Chiba Haomu's killing intent was released as he was ready to strike. His adorable face turned serious, and his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. He looked at Tangqing with killing intent. He was only waiting for an opportunity to kill in one strike. At this moment, Chiba Haomu was cold, completely different from the image he usually gave others. If the usual Chiba Haomu was an innocent and cute bunny, the current Chiba Haomu was like a wolf on the hunt. Chinitian wasn't here, so the battle still had to continue. Tangqing was amused when he saw Chiba Haomu's expression. This kid is quite serious. He looks like he wants to kill someone. When the corners of Tangqing's mouth curled up, Chiba Haomu's chance had arrived. This was because he knew very well that when a person smiled, it was also when they were at their most relaxed. When the mood was relaxed, the body would naturally relax. This was the perfect time to defeat his opponent. Chiba Haomu slashed out with his sword, and the wind whistled like a flute. This was the sound of the bamboo sword cutting through the air. The sword hilt and blade were burning hot as if they were about to be burned. When an expert made a move, it was obvious whether he was skilled or not. The speed of the sword, the strong airflow caused by the friction in the air, and the aura that enveloped his entire body were enough to make people's hearts tremble. An expert. This guy was definitely an expert. Moreover, he wasn't an expert in the field of student fights. He wasn't the president of the Taekwondo club, nor was he the number one in Huacheng. His opponent was a professional, an adult, and an expert with sharp sword skills that could kill. Tangxing was born into a family of armed escorts, and there were also experts in his family who practiced swordsmanship. The way they drew their swords was exactly the same as the one in front of him. In fact, after experiencing it for himself, this Japanese boy who smiled shyly just now was even more powerful. Tangxing raised his sword to meet the attack. Crack, the two swords collided, and the wooden sword in Tangxing's hand broke into two. Although both swords were wooden, one was the attacker, and the other was the interceptor. One side had accumulated enough strength and momentum, while the other only wanted to block the attack. The tea had spirit, and the sword had murderous intent. Chiba Haomu's wooden sword had murderous intent, while Tangxing's didn't. Intent against intent, murderous intent against no murderous intent, and the one without murderous intent was naturally not a match for the other. Chiba Haomu seemed to have predicted this scene. After he broke the wooden sword in Tangxing's hand, he didn't retract his sword force, nor did he release his sword energy. The sword continued to slash downwards, aiming straight for Tangxing's head. "Don't!" The crowd shouted loudly. Some of the more timid girls couldn't help but close their eyes. They didn't dare to watch the tragedy that was about to happen. With Chiba Haomu's current momentum, if Tangxing's head was hit, it would definitely be split in half. Chapter 85. Wielding a killing sword in his hand, his intent was to kill the hearts of others. Chiba Haomu had grasped the essence of swordsmanship, learned sword techniques, nurtured killing intent, and was known as a high-level swordsman. At such a young age, he was able to attain such a level of attainment in swordsmanship. This was truly an amazing feat as expected of someone from a famed swordsmanship sect. With hundreds and thousands of years of experience, it was only natural for them to have a complete set of methods to cultivate high-quality talents. In this era, not only did they need to rely on their fathers, they also needed to rely on their grandfathers. They needed to rely on their grandfathers. This caused Fang Yan to become extremely furious. If even birth was unequal, what fairness could there be in this world? After thinking about his own life experience, the anger within Fang Yan's heart gradually dissipated. There were some things that they could not decide on. He himself felt quite helpless about it. After cutting down the wooden sword in Tangxing's hand, Chiba Haomu's sword momentum did not dissipate. Instead, he increased his speed and pursued after Tangxing's head. If he were to land a direct hit, Tangxing's head would likely be cut into two, just like the wooden sword. "Don't!" the spectators cried out. Even Saburo Fujino, Matsushima Ki, and the others were terrified. Although they wanted to win this match, they had no intention of injuring the students of the Fellowship Academy. If something were to happen to the students of Rosefinch Secondary, they would not be able to answer to their superiors when they return. Naturally, whether or not they would be able to return was a question that they would have to consider. Fang Yan frowned. This kid's swordsmanship is not bad, but his killing intent is too heavy. His sword move was a simple one. From the moment he cut down Tangxing's wooden sword to the moment he aimed for Tangxing's head, he did not change his move at all. However, his attack was faster and more ferocious. It appeared as though he would not rest until he managed to cut down Tangxing. Although Fang Yan did not have a good impression of Chiba Haomu, he did not shout out to stop him. He had tested out Tangxing's strength. If Tangxing could not dodge this attack, then he would be too disappointing. Mentality. The most important thing was one's mentality. If Tangqing remained indifferent, then Qinya Haowu would undoubtedly be the winner of this duel. Luo Yi did not exercise the referee's right to stop the match. Originally, he had a cynical attitude, thinking that this was just a child's game. It was really boring. Luo Yi and Tangqing were friends, so he was quite clear about Tangqing's skills. If it weren't for the fact that Tangqing didn't like these troublesome things, the Taekwondo dojo would have been overturned by him countless times. He had sparred with Tangqing before, so he knew how big the gap between him and Tangqing was. He was just a hobby, but Tangqing was a professional. If the swordsmen chosen by the East Asians were not strong enough, they wouldn't even be able to cut vegetables for Tangqing. It wasn't until Chiba Haomu's sword cut straight at Tangqing's head that he felt a little burned. This was how war should be. Tangqing did not disappoint Fang Yan and Luo Yi's expectations. At the beginning, he was a little careless. Compared with the opponent standing in front of him, he was more concerned about whether Qinitian came to watch his match. Of course, it was necessary to defeat his opponent. He just hoped that when he defeated his opponent, his goddess, Qinitian, happened to be watching from the side. When he defeated his opponent, Qinitian could say, "Tangqing is so handsome," or smile sweetly at him. Just a smile was enough. However, Qinitian did not show up at the match. This made him feel extremely disappointed. When he was in a bad mood, he couldn't help but feel a little down. When he saw the serious look on his opponent's face, he felt a little funny. It was also at this time that Chiba Haowu launched an attack. When Tangqing's wooden sword broke, he was lost for a moment. Before his brain could react, his body had already made the necessary response. He gripped the broken hilt with his right hand and used the hard hilt to block Chiba Haowu's wooden sword. His left hand had already grabbed the broken slender sword that had yet to fall to the ground. Clang! Tangqing's wrist strength was amazing. When he blocked Chiba Haowu's slash with one hand, his left hand grabbed the wooden sword and stabbed it at Chiba Haowu's abdomen. When these two guys fought, they would not stop until one of them died. Chiba Haowu knew that he had met an expert with extremely strong reflexes, so his sword would be useless. He retracted his sword and retreated. Only then did the distance between the two widen. Chiba Haowu gripped his sword with both hands again and raised it high above his head. Tangqing looked at the broken sword in his hand with a serious expression. His eyes also became unprecedentedly serious. They knew that his opponent was an expert worthy of respect. "Tangqing, do you want to change your sword?" Luo Yi asked. He was the referee, so he was naturally willing to make things easier for Tangqing. Luo Yi could also see that Chiba Haowu was very powerful. If Tangqing kept using a broken sword, he might really be taken advantage of by this Japanese. Tangqing shook his head. "No need. If he doesn't change his sword, I won't either." "Be careful," Luo Yi warned. He didn't force the issue. Tangqing threw the broken sword in his left hand to the ground, leaving only the broken sword in his right hand. The wooden sword split down the middle. Part of it fell off, while the other part remained on the hilt. Thus, the sword hilt became a sharp dagger. Using a short sword against a long sword would definitely be disadvantageous in terms of distance and gravity. However, as long as Tangqing could get close to Chiba Haowu and attack him at close range, the long sword in Chiba Haowu's hand would become a burden. Clang! The two charged at the same time. Chiba Haowu did the same thing as before, slashing down with 180 degrees of gravity. The difference was that he was faster, and the angle of his attack was more strange and tricky, making it difficult to guard against. Tangqing dodged to the side, the short sword in his hand stabbing toward Chiba Haowu's left ribs. So, the long sword in Chiba Haowu's hand quickly changed from a heavy slash to a horizontal slash, slashing toward Tangqing's neck. Tangqing's steps were graceful, and his body had already moved out of the attack range of the wooden sword. Both of them were young and full of vigor, wanting to win this match. Chiba Hao's advantage lay in his speed and ruthlessness, while Tangqing's advantage lay in his agility and steadiness. The two of them fought with speed, and the flashes of their swords and blades dazzled the onlookers. Fang Yen glanced at Saburo Fujino, who was standing beside him, and found that he was staring at Tangqing with a surprised look on his face. Clearly, he didn't expect that a random student that Fang Yen had found would have such ability. He was actually able to fight invincible Wu Ren's Chiba Hao Wu to a draw. Originally, he thought that Qin Xiaoyan was scheming against him. Could it be that Qin Xiaoyan wanted to make him sad again? Saburo Fujino noticed that Fang Yen was looking at him and asked in a whisper, "This student, is he Rosefinch's student?" Of course, Fang Yen nodded his head with absolute certainty. His name is Tangqing. You can take a look at the list of students in our class. As Fang Yen spoke, he pulled out a list from his pocket. Pointing at number 42, Tangqing, he said, "That's him. He is the last one." Saburo Fujino's small eyes began to spin. Could it be that he had deliberately added Tangqing's name on the list in order to deal with my inspection? I know what you are suspecting. As Fang Yen spoke, he pulled out a student ID card from his pocket and said, "Look, this is student Tangqing's student ID card." Saburo Fujino accepted the student ID card and inspected it. It was indeed Tangqing's photo. His name and other information were all authentic. But, isn't this student ID card a little too new? Did it just get done? It was true that Tangqing's student ID card had just been completed. He had been transferred from Class 1 to Class 9. Naturally, he needed to report it to the school. The school would also need to issue a new student ID card for him. Fang Yen knew that Saburo Fujino was a paranoid person. Be it Qin Etian, Xiao Pinqing or Tangqing, any one of these students would be an outstanding talent. How could they just happen to be in Class 9? Thus, Fang Yen had made preparations in advance. He had brought along the relevant ID cards of these students. Weren't you suspicious? You are welcome to check it out. Of course, this time, it was fortunate that Qin Etian had been transferred to Class 9 in advance because of him. As for Tangqing, he had been transferred to Class 9 in order to follow Qin Etian. Without the help of these two experts, Fang Yen would not have so easily agreed to compete with the Wu Ren inspection team in the way of tea and fencing. In the past, the school would let the students of Class 1 be in charge of receiving inspection teams from outside the school. A straw in the wind. From the performance of Qin Etian and Tangqing, Class 1 was indeed full of talents and elites. What Fang Yen did not know was that Qin Etian and Tangqing were originally the top 3 students in Class 1. They were elites that the teachers of Class 1 treated like treasures. The two of them skipped Class 1 after the other, causing Class 1's teacher in charge to be heartbroken. He hated Fang Yen to the core. If it were not for Lu Chaoga speaking up for Fang Yen, Class 1's teacher in charge would have long since jumped out and thrown a pair of white gloves at Fang Yen's face. "It was just done," Fang Yen answered honestly. The smile on Saburo Fujino's face grew wider and he said, "Then, is there such a possibility? Tangqing was not originally a student in your class? Is he a student from another class or school? For the sake of this competition, did you specially invite him over?" Fang Yen looked at Saburo Fujino with a smile and said, "Fujino-sensei's questioning expression is truly amusing. Like a cute woman." "Teacher Fang Yen, what do you mean by that?" Saburo Fujino stared at Fang Yen warily. This fellow could not possibly have that kind of hobby, right? I am a decent person. I have heard that there are 2 types of women. Those who are good-looking but unreasonable and those who are not good-looking but unreasonable. I feel that Teacher Fujino is very similar to the second type of woman. Fang Yen. Saburo Fujino was truly furious. He could still accept being called a woman. However, calling him an ugly woman was beyond the limits of what he could accept. "Teacher Fujino, are you a sore loser?" Fang Yen asked with a straight face. Chapter 86. Who is a sore loser? Saburo Fujino was like a rabbit that had its tail stepped on as he screamed out. If that is not the case, why would Teacher Fujino keep picking on such minor flaws? I cannot help but suspect that Teacher Fujino is looking for an excuse for his own failure, Fang Yen sneered. Seeing the two clowns bickering again, Lu Chaoga gave them a glance before turning her attention back to the intense battle taking place in the middle of the arena. Matsushima Ki shook his head. He was helpless against these two fellows. I am afraid that you will cheat, Saburo Fujino said with confidence. This is your territory. Who knows what kind of arrangements you will make in order to win? This is a classic example of measuring the heart of a gentleman with one's own yardstick, Fang Yen said with a ridiculing tone. Did anyone invite you to listen in on Class 9? Saburo Fujino thought about it. Back then, Vice Principal Matsushima Ki was the one who suggested to listen in on Class 9. When Matsushima Ki saw that Fang Yen was able to become Rosefinch's language teacher at such a young age, he became curious and suggested to listen in on Class 9. In other words, it was a random inspection and no one had arranged for it. No, Saburo Fujino said. Who suggested the tea ceremony, calligraphy, and fencing competitions? It was me. If that is the case, shouldn't I be the one questioning the school's deliberate arrangements? Why are you questioning us? Fang Yen said with a chuckle. He pointed at Chiba Kaoru, Ueno Nobita, and Chiba Halmu, who was brandishing his sword. Do you dare swear to all the deities of the two countries that they are not the candidates that you have arranged in advance? Or is it because you already knew that there was such an expert in your team? That's why you deliberately proposed these 3 competitions? Our school has many talents. It is not just these 3 competitions. Saburo Fujino said stubbornly. He was not willing to admit that he had planned this out, and the result was a painful truth. Is that so? Then, shall we add 3 more competitions? Fang Yen said with a smile. Saburo Fujino did not dare to agree. Rosefinch had won 2 of the 3 matches he had arranged in advance. If Rosefinch proposed the competition, would they still have a chance of winning? It was one thing for others to humiliate him, but did he have to humiliate himself as well? What? Are you unwilling? I don't have enough time to arrange it. Saburo Fujino finally found a plausible excuse. We're going back tomorrow. A student's homework cannot be delayed. You see, you have all taken advantage of us, but Fujino-sensei is still suspicious of us. If you really think that there's something wrong with the 3 students I've chosen, their student files and information are all in the school's archives. You can check them at any time. This can't be faked, right? However, I'd like to ask, are the 20 students from the Wuren delegation all in the same class? Naturally not, Saburo Fujino replied. We are selecting based on merit. It's the same every year. This is Wu Ren's rule. Exactly. You will select outstanding students from the entire school or even the entire country to form a team. We are only selecting students from Wuren High School to be sent out, Saburo Fujino corrected. Who selected students from all over the country to participate in the competition? Was there a need for that? Who knows what happened to you all in Japan? I have no way of checking their student IDs and files. Fang Yen waved his hand. Saburo Fujino felt as though he had been stabbed in the chest. The feeling of being drenched in blood. You are sending outstanding students from all over the country to compete against students from the same class. Do you feel guilty for doing this? Fang Yen said with righteous indignation. Although we know that this is unfair to us, we did not refuse. Why? Because we consider you all as our guests, our close comrades. But Fujino-sensei, how did you treat us? Is this how East Asians treat their friends? I'm sorry. Saburo Fujino was deeply moved and he blurted out those 3 words. After saying those words, Saburo Fujino reacted. Why did I have to apologize to him? This fellow's stomach is full of evil tricks. Who knows which of his words is the truth and which is the lie? Fujino-sensei, you are able to recognize your own mistakes and be a narrow-minded person. Moreover, you are willing to sincerely apologize to me. Fang Yen held Saburo Fujino's hand and said with a sincere face, I will consider accepting your offer. As the two of them were bickering, the battle between Chiba Haomu and Tangqing had reached its climax. Luo Yi followed closely behind Chiba Haomu and Tangqing, shouting incessantly. Occasionally, he would even shout out words like, good sword, despicable sword. It was as though he was the one participating in the battle. The baby-faced Chiba Haomu had entered a berserk state. His hair was disheveled and his eyes were sharp. The black Taoist robes he wore fluttered in the wind. Every step he took forward or backward would cause the wind to howl. He had inherited the essence of the North Star one-blade style. His sword attacks were simple, but the angles were strange. Every one of his sword attacks was aimed at the vital spots of his opponent. Add that to his ghostly speed when moving at full speed, it was impossible to defend against his attacks. Tangqing's deep foundation came in handy at this moment. He was able to deal with the myriad of changes by remaining unchanging. His body was tall and his movements were slow. Standing there, he was like a target, allowing Chiba Haomu to attack him from all directions, making him extremely busy. Tangqing changed his strategy. Originally, he had wanted to fight Chiba Haomu with speed and end the battle in the shortest amount of time possible. That way, he would look more handsome. However, when he found that he could not defeat Chiba Haomu in a short amount of time and that Chiba Haomu was better at speed than him, he knew that something was amiss. Rhythm. Everyone had their own unique rhythm. This was also the rhythm that they were best at. Chiba Haomu liked speed, but Tangqing's foundation was solid. Additionally, his swordsmanship was methodical, making it more suitable for him to stay still. He could not follow Chiba Haomu's rhythm. He wanted to control the rhythm himself. Or rather, he wanted to make full use of his own rhythm. Thus, it became a situation where one was fast on the offense and the other was slow on the defense. It was precisely because both of them made full use of what they were good at that the battle was so exciting. Dash. The long sword in his hand swung down with great force, aiming for Tangqing's face. Tangqing blocked the attack with his short dagger. He took a few steps forward and directly crashed into Chiba Haomu's chest. Chiba Haomu's sword was raised in the air. His chest was empty, and he lost control of his inner line. However, he changed his moves extremely quickly and viciously. Whoosh! The wooden sword in his hand made a 180-degree turn. Initially, the tip of the sword was pointing outwards, but when he hooked his wrist, the tip of the sword stabbed at Tangqing, who was in his arms. To an onlooker, it was almost a suicidal move. If he was holding a real sword in his hand, then when he stabbed Tangqing's body, it would be inevitable that he would also stab himself. However, he knew the characteristics of a wooden sword very well. He knew the weight of the sword and the speed at which he attacked, and what kind of damage he would inflict on his opponent. Clang! Tangqing once again blocked the tip of the long sword with the hilt of the sword and slammed his elbow backward. Chiba Haomu had two choices now. He could either endure the elbow attack and persist in stabbing his long sword into Tangqing's chest. Or, he could dodge the elbow attack, and his suicidal attack would be nullified at the same time. Chiba Haomu chose the former. In a battle where both sides were evenly matched, the only thing left to do was to make a choice. A smart person would kill 1,000 enemies at the cost of 800 of himself, while a fool would kill 800 enemies at the cost of 1,000 injuries. Victory and defeat would be decided in this way. He could withstand the elbow attack, but he believed that Tangqing would not be able to withstand the full force of his piercing technique. Ugh! Chiba Haomu grunted. His upper body fell backwards, but his lower body was unusually stable. Creak! The tip of the long sword in his hand moved forward with unstoppable force, grinding against the hilt. The tip of the sword inched closer to Tangqing's chest. As long as it pierced through, Tangqing would instantly lose the ability to fight. Of course, he would lose the ability to fight forever. Ah! A miserable scream rang out. The wooden sword in Chiba Haumu's hand fell to the ground. He clutched his abdomen with his right hand and staggered backward. Plop! His body fell on the wooden floor with a hideous expression. His forehead was dripping with sweat, and he looked like he was in extreme pain. Tangxing stood still and sneered at Chiba Haumu, who was sitting on the ground. The sword hilt that he had been holding in his left hand to block the tip of the sword had been transferred to his right hand, and red blood was seeping out from the blade. Chiba Haumu. A group of people rushed over and surrounded Chiba Haumu. Saburo Fujino rushed to the front of Tangxing and roared, "Kid, you bastard, what did you do to him? What did you do to him?" Chiba Kaori's face was covered in tears as she cried, "Haumu, little brother, are you okay? How do you feel?" Matsushima Nori was a beat too slow to squeeze into the middle of the crowd. Her expression was ugly as she stared sharply at Lu Chaoga and said, "If anything happens to my student, we will definitely seek justice." Lu Chaoga calmly looked at Matsushima Nori and said, "We also don't want this to happen. Of course, I will respect any choice you make." Tangxing walked to the front of Feng Yan and threw the sword hilt in his hand to the ground. He said in a free and easy manner, "I won." After saying that, he turned around and left. "Be careful!" someone shouted. Chiba Haumu, who was lying on the ground a moment ago, jumped up and stabbed the sword in his hand at Tangxing's back. This kid's eyes were bloodshot. Chapter 87. Tangxing walked away proudly and carefreely. He was proud of the fact that he had just won a match. Moreover, it was a very good match. Although Qinitian didn't get to see it with his own eyes, he had won in front of Feng Yan. Let's see if this guy still dares to belittle and bully me like this in the future. Free and easy was the image he always presented to others. As the most handsome guy in Vermilion Bird Middle School, he needed to put on airs at all times to be a good spokesperson. This was just a match between students, and he really didn't want to think too much about it. A loss was a loss, and a win was a win. Now that the outcome had been decided, what was there to argue about? However, what Tangxing didn't expect was that Chiba Hauwu didn't give up just because he thought that the match was over. While a group of people surrounded him and looked at him with concern, Chiba Hauwu grabbed the wooden sword on the ground and jumped up, thrusting the tip of the long sword at Tangxing's back. He couldn't accept this. He couldn't lose. He wanted to prove to his compatriots and himself that he was invincible. It happened so suddenly that Tangxing wasn't prepared at all. When he heard someone shouting behind him, he turned around in surprise. He couldn't believe that Chiba Hauwu still dared to stab someone with his sword after the match was over. Thus, Chiba Hauwu's sword that was originally aimed at his back became his heart. Anyone who had watched Animal World would know that when an animal struggled on its deathbed, it could explode with shocking destructive power. When a swordsman was determined to win, he could also perform beyond his usual level. Great sword chi technique. Great sword chi technique. His movements were graceful and ruthless, and his speed was as fast as lightning. He had just jumped up, and in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Tangxing. The long sword closed an inch by inch, and was about to pierce a large hole in Tangxing's chest. Tangxing felt the sharp killing intent, and his body tensed up. It was a natural reaction when facing extreme danger. There was a burning pain in his chest, which was caused by the sword chi that had attacked him first. Hiss, the oxygen in the air rubbed against the lightning-fast wooden sword, producing a hissing sound. That was the sound of the air being stimulated and ignited. The wooden sword was too hot, and the tip of the sword was scorching hot. It looked like it was about to catch fire. After practicing swordsmanship for more than 10 years, this was the best sword thrust Chinya Hauwu had ever performed. This was his highest level. This was a realm he had never reached before. Today, he did it. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was laughing. It was a ferocious and joyous smile. For this sword, for this sword that he had thrust out with the highest level. Tangxing was dumbfounded. If this was a battlefield, if it was a formal battle just now, with his ability, he could definitely make the most exquisite and accurate reaction or counterattack. However, at this moment, he was at a loss. What was this? Were they going to continue fighting? Or would they fight to the death? However, what was the attitude of the school? Could he do that? Why? His pupils dilated and his heart was in a mess. He felt the tip of the sword pierce through his clothes. The wooden sword was about to continue forward, piercing through his flesh and organs. Everything it encountered, even his bones. Qianye Haowu felt it too. There was only one focus in his eyes, and that was where the tip of the sword was. He felt the sound of a sharp sword piercing through something. It was a clear and melodious sound that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. Such a voice filled him with fighting spirit and a sense of accomplishment. Tangxing retreated, and retreated again. However, how could this aimless retreating speed compare to Qianye Haowu's flying speed? Kill! Qianye Haowu roared. As he roared, his dantian was full of qi, allowing him to fly faster and more nimbly in the air. All of a sudden, the entire scene underwent a drastic change. Tangxing was still retreating out of habit, while Qianye Haowu's body stopped in the air. The difference between these two extremes was strange and distorted. No matter how hard he tried, the sword could not move forward. Everyone's eyes widened as they watched this unbelievable scene unfold before them. A gust of wind blew, fluttering Qianye Haowu's black robes, Tangxing's white robes, and Fang Yan's soft hair. It was still alive. Everything was alive. It was just that Fang Yan, the time magician, had a little control over it. Fang Yan's body was tilted, one hand holding on to Qianye Haowu's ankle. He had not used his other hand yet. When Chiba Haowu passed by Fang Yan, the only thing he could do was to turn around 180 degrees and grab at the same time, seeing that he had the situation under control and that Tangxing had not been pierced by Qianye Haowu's sword. Fang Yan finally felt relieved. If someone had died, everyone present would not be able to escape responsibility. Whether it was Lu Chaoga, Matsushima Ki, Saburo Fujino, or himself, all of the teachers would face serious charges. Qianye Haowu, for the sake of victory, to satisfy his own selfish desires, he had disregarded the lives of others and the future of a large group of teachers. This narrow-minded madman, this bloodthirsty demon. Fang Yan was enraged. Qianye Haowu's actions had thoroughly enraged him. Fang Yan's right hand pulled hard, and Qianye Haowu's body flew back. Qianye Haowu stabbed back with his sword, but Fang Yan's left hand shot out like lightning and punched his wrist. Clang! Qianye Haowu felt pain in his arm, and the wooden sword fell to the ground. After using the power of Tai Chi to dissipate the remaining power in his body, Qianye Haowu became Fang Yan's meat target. He grabbed Qianye Haowu's calf with one hand, and with his left foot as the axis, he kicked with his right foot. His body immediately spun, and Qianye Haowu's body, which was still in the air, spun with him. Fang Yan's right foot kicked again, and they spun even faster. Thousand-faced spinning top. At first, Fang Yan needed to borrow external force, but when their bodies spun at a certain speed, Fang Yan became the axis, and Qianye Haowu became the pendulum. Now, Qianye Haowu's body was dragging Fang Yan to spin. Whoosh, 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 everyone could only hear the whistling wind, like an electric fan spinning at a high frequency. In the beginning, they could still see Fang Yan's cold face and Qianye Haowu's frightened eyes. Soon, they became a shadow of the wind. They were standing in front of you, but you couldn't see them clearly. They had countless faces swaying in front of you, and your eyes couldn't take them in. This time, it was the people around them who were worried about Qianye Haowu. Let go of Qianye Haowu, let go of him, Fang Yan. What are you doing? Principal Lu, ask your teacher to let go of him. Lu Chaoga's face was as cold as frost, and she said in a cold voice, my students are rational, and so is my teacher. I have full confidence in them. Lu Chaoga was fighting back. I have confidence in my teacher and students, but do you have the same confidence? If you have confidence in your students, then what kind of behavior did the scene that just happened in front of your eyes belong to? Matsushima Nori was speechless, and after a long time, he said, "We have to find a gentler solution." Chiba Haowu was really frightened, and she ran over to grab Matsushima Nori's hand, saying, "Principal, please save Chinya Haowu. Please save Chinya Haowu." Matsushima Nori glanced at Fang Yen, who was still spinning in circles, and shook his head, indicating that there was nothing he could do. She couldn't go up and beat up Fang Yen, could she? Chiba Haowu ran to Lu Chaoga and said in English, "Principal, I apologize. I know Chinya Haowu. He's too ridiculous, but he's just a child. But, he's still a child, please save him. Everyone has to pay the price for doing something wrong," Lu Chaoga said with a straight face. After saying that, she felt that it was a little familiar. Who said that to her? Fang Yen spun faster and faster, as if he had really turned into a spinning top. If the little flags on the Spring Festival Gala were to spin at this speed, they wouldn't even last 10 minutes. When they reached a subtle speed, Fang Yen suddenly let go of Chinya Haowu's ankle. Chinya Haowu was like an arrow that was shot out, flying forward quickly. Before Chiba Haowu could rejoice, she saw Fang Yen running in the direction where Chinya Haowu was flying. Fang Yen ran forward, and when his toes touched the ground, he bounced up and landed without a sound. He was running on the ground, while Chinya Haowu was flying in the air. From a bystander's point of view, it looked like Fang Yen was running with Chinya Haowu on his back. Of course, Fang Yen wasn't running with him on his back. He had other uses for his hands. Bang, 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 his fists shot out like lightning, hitting Chinya Haowu's head, face, chest, abdomen, and every other part of his body that he could reach. With each punch, Chinya Haowu's body would rise and fall at an even faster speed. Fang Yen punched again and sent Chinya Haowu flying higher into the air. The dojo was huge. Fang Yen pulled Chinya Haowu's body from the entrance to the inner wall. Seeing that Chinya Haowu's head was about to hit the wall in front of him, Fang Yen suddenly did a 180-degree handstand. With both hands on the ground, he kicked with his right foot at lightning speed. Bang, what a beautiful shot. Chinya Haowu's body flew high into the roof of the dojo and then fell at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. Clang. His body fell heavily on the wooden board, and he landed face first on the ground with his butt facing the sky. He didn't move or make a sound for a long time. The entire venue was silent. Everyone stared at Fang Yen with widened eyes. They looked at the handsome and tall man standing in the middle of the dojo. Was he a Superman hidden in the human world? Chapter 88. If you are given the freedom to choose your teacher, what qualities and abilities do you want your teacher to possess? Handsome and confident, someone said. Knowledgeable and knowledgeable, someone else said. Amiable and able to get along well with the students. This was the common wish of the students. There might be 1,000 answers to this question, but not a single student would request for their teacher to know martial arts. Martial arts was one of the traditions of Huaxia and one of the labels of Huaxia's culture. Even some foreigners would praise Huaxia's martial arts. However, how many of them had actually seen it in action? In the eyes of the ordinary students, the fight between Tangcheng and Chiba Haowu had already exceeded their scope of understanding. They felt that it was impossible for something like that to happen. This kind of martial arts was too distant from their lives. However, when Fang Yen suddenly unleashed his universe like a Saint Seiya and threw Chiba Haowu into the air, they looked at Fang Yen as if they were looking at an alien. Was this still the Fang Yen teacher they knew, the one who read poems on the Bird River? Was this still the Fang Yen teacher who led them to the alley to learn Alley in the Rain? Was this still the Fang Yen teacher who was sharp with his words, lively and interesting in class, and looked like the big brother next door? The students were all filled with admiration and worship. Their bodies were trembling, and they were so excited that they could not control themselves. Matsushima Ki's face was filled with shock as he stared at Fang Yen for a long time. He had even temporarily forgotten to check on Chiba Haomu's injuries. Is there anything else I don't know? Lu Chaoga murmured as she looked at Fang Yan's eyes thoughtfully. Although she had not known Fang Yan for long, she believed that she had some understanding of him. Talented, arrogant, quick-witted and courageous. What she saw today had overturned her understanding of Fang Yan. She knew that the Fang Yan she had seen before was only the tip of the iceberg. What else was he hiding? Saburo Fujino's body was trembling. It was not surprise or admiration, but anger. This bastard, this guy who deserves to be struck by lightning, he has challenged me time and time again. Is this the weak scholar he was talking about? Is this what he meant by being powerless? Saburo Fujino could imagine it. If he had accepted Fang Yan's challenge, even if it was just once, the one lying on the same spot as Chiba Haomu would be him. When he thought of Chinya Haomu, he also thought of the situation they were currently facing. Saburo Fujino quickly rushed over to the spot where Chiba Haomu had fallen. He grabbed Chiba Haomu's shoulder and shook him. Chiba Haomu, how are you? Wake up. Hearing Saburo Fujino's shout, the others reacted. Kei Matsushima, Chiba Kaoru, and the teachers and students of the Wurin investigation team gathered around him. They looked at Chiba Haomu's body worriedly. Even now, his eyes were still closed and he did not move at all. He didn't know what was going on. If you continue to shake him, his bones will fall apart, Fang Yen said coldly. He just couldn't understand why some people would hug and shake someone when they saw someone fainting on the ground. Didn't they know that this kind of action could sometimes kill someone? After the high-intensity exercise earlier, Fang Yen had vented out most of the anger in his heart. He was also a martial artist. Moreover, he was a martial artist with style and morals. After thousands of years, the words, martial art moral, had been deeply engraved in the blood of every martial artist. Regardless of whether it was a sect or a family, martial artists must first cultivate their morals. If one's morals were not right, one's martial arts would not be pure. Those who learned martial arts and used it to harm others would be known as demons in the past. Now, they would be known as scum. Fang Yen was strict with himself and he abided by the ancient spirit of martial art moral. Thus, when he saw scum like Chiba Haomu appear, his mood was particularly bad. If such a person was in ancient times, everyone would have the right to punish him. Moreover, the consequences of Chiba Haomu's actions were too serious. He only wanted to win, he only wanted to stab out with his sword. If he were to succeed, how would they end up? How would Rosefinch Secondary end up? How would his dearest, most respected and most beloved Lu Chaoga end up? For a moment, Fang Yan's rationality was overshadowed by his anger. He gulped down a mouthful of saliva with the smell of blood. Thus, he spun, chased and sent him flying with a kick. Only by doing so would his heart feel better. Hearing Fang Yan's words, Fujino Saburo quickly loosened his grip on Chiba Haomu's shoulder. Fang Yen. Fujino Saburo shouted at Fang Yen. Fujino-sensei, do you want to reason with me? Fang Yen stared at Fujino Saburo with a sharp gaze and spoke in an unfriendly tone. Fujino Saburo was a little afraid of Fang Yen. Teacher Fang Yen. Matsushima Ki's voice was calm. However, it was clearly more intimidating compared to Fujino Saburo's shout. What happened to Chiba Haomu? If anything happens to him, you will bear all the responsibility. If he does not die, I will bear all the responsibility. If he dies, the school will bear all the responsibility, Fang Yen sneered. Similarly, if anything happens to my student, you will also bear all the responsibility. Fang Yen turned to look at Tangsheng and asked, You have not fainted yet? What? Tangsheng looked at Fang Yen with a confused expression. So many things had happened so suddenly that he was still in a daze. Wasn't it just a friendly match? How did it end up like this? Don't you feel dizzy and your internal organs are on fire? Don't you feel like you are about to faint? Fang Yan asked. Only then did Tangxing understand. He clutched his chest and shouted, "My heart is in so much pain. I cannot take it anymore. I cannot take it anymore." Plop. Tangxing shamelessly lay down at the entrance of the building. His posture was very unsightly. Fang Yan pointed at Tangxing, who was lying on the floor, and said angrily, "This was originally a match to deepen our understanding and friendship. Our side has always adhered to the principle of friendship first, competition second. We have always been respectful and modest, courteous and restrained. What did you do? Ambushing someone when the match is already over, what kind of behavior is that? This is a shameful behavior, a shameless behavior. Chiba Haomu's sneak attack caused our team member to be seriously injured and he is currently unconscious. If anything happens to Tangxing, we will use the most severe and violent means to demand justice. Rosefinch is not someone that can be bullied so easily." Saburo Fujino and Ki Matsushima exchanged glances and understood the meaning behind those words, fake injuries. They knew that Tangxing had deliberately lied down on the floor and his injuries were not that serious. However, if they insisted that Chiba Haomu's sneak attack caused Tangxing to be seriously injured and that he was still unconscious, there was nothing they could do. They could not just run to the sickbed and point at Tangxing and shout that he was faking injuries and that he was actually fine. Whether his body was injured or not, they could easily find out. Whether his head was injured or not, how could they be sure? Ki Matsushima looked at Lu Chaoga, implying that she needed to make a decision on this matter. After all, this happened in Rosefinch's territory. Lu Chaoga looked at Fang Yan and said, "Send the injured team member to the hospital for treatment?" Fang Yan nodded and said, "Of course." However, this matter is not over. When Tangxing opened his eyes, only Fang Yan was sitting beside him. The others had all left. Tangxing's injuries were not serious, but they were not light either. Although Chiba Haomu's sword did not pierce through his body, it did cut his flesh. If Fang Yan had not grabbed Chiba Haomu's ankle, the consequences would have been terrible. In addition, he had exercised too much in the afternoon. As he was undergoing one checkup after another, he unknowingly fell asleep. When he woke up again, his exhaustion disappeared and he felt much better. "Don't be so fast," Fang Yan said. "If Chiba Haomu is unconscious for 1 day, you will be unconscious for 2 days. If Chiba Haomu is lying here for half a year, you will be lying here for half a year and a day. We must endure longer than them. There is no need to do this, right?" Tangxing said with a bitter face. If what Fang Yan said was true, Chiba Haomu would not recover after half a year. Would he really have to spend half a year on the sickbed? He felt that he would go crazy. Moreover, how could he pursue Qinitian while lying on the sickbed? If Qinitian was snatched away by another boy while he was lying on the sickbed, who would be responsible? He was a boy with dreams and goals. There were too many things for him to consider. "Who am I?" Fang Yan pointed at his face and asked. "Fang Yan." Tangxing looked at Fang Yan with a puzzled expression. What was wrong with this guy? Did he not even know who he was? "Teacher, the language teacher of class 9. "No, I am your savior," Fang Yan said. "You have to admit that if I did not save you today, you would not have the chance to open your eyes and see me. You would not have the right to breathe the air in this ward that is not considered fresh, let alone talk to me. Am I right?" Yes. Tangxing's heart was extremely bitter. He owed Fang Yan a favor, a huge one. "I beat up Chiba Haomu for you, right?" Yes. Although I am not someone who expects others to repay favors, if Chiba Haomu does not recover, Wu Ren will definitely hold me responsible. If they hold me responsible, I will be in a lot of trouble. Of course, if your injuries are more serious than his, they will not have the right and face to trouble me. Tell me, how are you going to repay me for saving your life? If Chiba Haomu is in a coma for 1 day, I will be in a coma for 2 days. If Chiba Haomu is in a coma for half a year, I will be in a coma for half a year and a day, Tangxing said with a sad face. Fang Yan patted Tangxing's shoulder and said, as expected of my, Fang Yan's, student. When I first saw you, I felt that you are a good man who will never go back on your word. Chapter 89. Chiba Haomu did not stay in a coma for 3 to 5 days like Fang Yan had said. He woke up on the night of the accident. He opened his eyes and looked at the white ceiling with a dull expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Chiba Haomu sat beside Chiba Haomu, her beautiful eyes staring at him without blinking. Her face was calm and she did not appear particularly happy because he had woken up. Matsushima Ki and Saburo Fujino exchanged glances. Matsushima Ki then signaled Saburo with his eyes. Despite his reluctance, Saburo Fujino walked over to stand before Chiba Haomu and asked in a soft voice, "Student Chiba Haomu, do you feel better?" Chiba Haomu did not answer, as if he did not hear his teacher. Saburo Fujino turned to look at Matsushima Ki and continued, "If you feel any discomfort in your body, you must tell us immediately. We will find a doctor to check on you." Chiba Haomu still did not answer. Saburo Fujino quickly walked to Matsushima Ki and whispered, "Principal, Chiba Haomu's condition is not optimistic. Is there something wrong with his mind?" "Give him some time," Matsushima Ki said. She glanced at Chiba Haomu and said, "Teacher Fujino, let's go out first." "Okay," Saburo Fujino replied. Matsushima Ki patted Chiba Haomu's shoulder and said, "We'll leave Chiba Haomu to you." Chiba Haomu stood up and bowed deeply to Matsushima Ki. Matsushima Ki sighed and said, "Don't worry. We will take care of this." It was late at night and the corridor was empty. It was abnormally quiet. Saburo Fujino closed the door and said angrily, "Principal, Rosefinch is too much of a bully. How can a teacher participate in a competition between students? It is one thing for a teacher to participate, but he also beat up a student. We must seek justice for Chiba Haomu. Otherwise, Wuren Senior High School's reputation will be tarnished. How can we face our peers at Wuren Senior High School?" "Okay." Matsushima Ki nodded. "Then, Teacher Fujino will seek justice for Wuren." Principal Matsushima Ki. Saburo Fujino looked embarrassed. He was just an ordinary teacher in the delegation. He was not on the same level as Rosefinch Secondary. Only Matsushima Ki, the leader of the delegation, was qualified to negotiate with Rosefinch on behalf of Wu Ren. If he stepped forward, he would not have a legitimate reason to do so, and Rosefinch would not take him seriously. Matsushima Ki was in a bad mood. He also knew that it wasn't the time to be angry with his subordinates, so he explained, "I'm afraid this matter is a little troublesome." "What's so troublesome about it?" Saburo Fujino was unconvinced. However, the tone of his voice was clearly much lower. "Fang Yan is Vermilion Bird's teacher. He severely injured Wu Ren's student in front of so many people. That's right, we'll let Shinya Haowu lie on the bed. We will not leave until they give us an apology, a satisfactory answer, and compensation sufficient to make up for our physical and emotional wounds. If it really doesn't work, we can make things worse. I want to see if they can withstand the pressure from society and the international community. It would be good if things were that simple." Matsushima Ki shook his head. "Chiba Haowu violated the rules first, stabbing us in the back. They have something to use against us. That teacher surnamed Fang is too cunning. I fear that they are the ones who will not let this matter rest." "Principal, you mean to say, not only will they not admit their mistake, they will also cause trouble for us? Based on your understanding of them, what do you think?" Matsushima Ki asked. Saburo Fujino thought back to how he had interacted with Fang Yan and nodded with certainty. They will definitely do that. However, none of their team members were injured. What reason would they use to cause trouble for us? Some of our team members were injured. That is a fact that everyone knows. How do you know that none of their team members were injured? Chiba Haowu did not stab him at all. He was standing there perfectly fine, but he also fainted on the spot. That was a trick. Saburo Fujino was unable to continue. If they can trick, why can't Rosefinch do the same? Besides, what evidence do you have to prove that Rosefinch is cheating? Let's reconcile, Matsushima Ki said. Find a way to reconcile. What a humiliation. Saburo Fujino felt his chest aching again. Ever since they had inadvertently walked into Fong Yan's class 9, his chest had been aching ever since. I think the most humiliating thing is yet to come, Matsushima Ki said in a heavy tone. If we only lost our dignity, it would be a fortunate thing for us now. Chiba Haowu knew that Principal Matsushima Ki and Saburo Fujino were still standing in the corridor outside. Chiba Haowu's impulsive action had pushed the Wuren inspection team into a very unfavorable situation. They were probably having a headache over how to deal with the aftermath. She did not deliberately listen to the conversation outside. She looked at Chiba Haowu's dry lips and said, "You need to drink some water." Chiba Haowu did not respond. Chiba Haowu did not need his answer. She walked over and poured a cup of water for him. Then, she used a spoon to feed him. Chiba Haowu only swallowed. There was no expression on his face. "What do you want?" Chiba Haowu asked softly. "Is it just victory?" "If father knew what you did, he would definitely feel ashamed of your actions," Chiba Haowu said. Chiba Haowu finally reacted. A flash of sadness flashed across his eyes. Then, it was replaced by anger. He pointed at the door of the ward and said, "Get out." Chiba Haowu did not go out. She scooped another spoonful of water and fed it to Chiba Haowu. Then, she said, "Since you were young, the person you admired the most was father. Although you've never said it, I can see it in your eyes. You have talent and you work harder than anyone else. You want to catch up to him and even surpass him. No one will doubt this, even I firmly believe this. You will definitely be able to do it. You will become a better swordsman than father." "I don't understand swords. I only understand tea. However, I believe that everything in this world is connected. If you don't wash your hands clean, then the tea you brew will definitely have a strange smell. It's the same with swordsmanship. If you don't wash your heart clean, then your swordsmanship will no longer be pure. Are you teaching me a lesson?" Chiba Haowu sneered. "Teaching your failed brother a lesson? Tell him how much of a failure he is. Some people can never reach the pinnacle of swordsmanship in their entire lives. Why? Because he is impatient for success. It's just like brewing tea. If the water isn't boiling, the tea will be green. If it's boiling for too long, the tea will be astringent. Little brother, I just want to tell you not to do inappropriate things at inappropriate times. You don't understand a swordsman's pursuit of the highest swordsmanship. You don't understand a swordsman's thirst for victory," Chiba Haowu said fiercely. "You won't understand." "I understand. How can I not understand?" Chiba Haowu's voice was gentle and soft as if she would never be anxious. "I also want to brew the best tea in the world. I also want to win. Who likes the feeling of failure? But I'm willing to wait. I believe that I can do it, and one day I will. So, I don't mind giving myself more time. What I'm pursuing is different from what you're pursuing," Chiba Haowu said. "What I want is to win every match. I won't allow myself to fail." "But you still lost," Chiba Haowu said. "You should know that there's still a gap between you and your opponent. Even that swordsman named Tangxing can't compare to you in terms of composure and magnanimity, let alone that teacher who stopped you." Chiba Haowu closed his eyes in pain. Fong Yan, that demon-like existence. He was like a giant with infinite strength, while Chiba Haowu was only a short and ugly dwarf. He was completely powerless before him. Why? Chiba Haowu clenched the bedsheet tightly. Because he used too much force, the plain white bedsheet was twisted out of shape, and he tore a few holes in it. Why can he do it? Why can he do it? He really couldn't understand. Fang Yan didn't look much older than him. Why was he able to have such skills? Could it be that Japanese swordsmen really couldn't compare to Huaxia swordsmen? Or could it be that because Huaxia was the origin of martial arts, any random swordsman from Huaxia was an unbeatable monster? Chiba Haowu came from a famous kendo family, and was also a top-notch expert in the surrounding circle. Everyone who saw him was not stingy with their compliments. Everyone who fought with him said that his swordsmanship was amazing. Other than his father, who did not praise him, everyone said that his future was limitless. He was proud, but he was also impatient. He knew that his father didn't praise him because he wasn't good enough. He wanted to conquer everyone, including his father. During this trip to Huaxia, he first met Tang Sheng, a well-matched opponent, and then he met Fang Yan, a superhuman teacher. In the same class, there were already 2 people who could defeat him. Then, how many experts did Huaxia have? When he thought of the answer to this question, he felt a chill run down his spine. Chiba Haowu gently stroked Chiba Haowu's tightly furrowed brows, trying to calm them down a little. She said, "If you have too many things on your mind, your hand that holds the sword will become heavier. Let go of your burdens and become a true swordsman. Win everyone's respect like your father." "I don't care if I win people's respect." Chiba Haowu clutched his aching chest and said, "I must defeat him. Only then can I wash away the humiliation I received today." Chapter 90. After some intense bargaining, Matsushima Maki, on behalf of the Wu Ren investigation team, accepted the many requests of assistance from Rosefinch Senior High School. Finally, the matter was temporarily put to rest. According to the usual rules, when the investigation team finished their work and was ready to return home, Rosefinch Secondary would host a cocktail party to welcome them. At the same time, it was also a farewell party. At this time, not only would Vice Principal Lu Chaoga, who was in charge of the reception, be present, but Rosefinch Secondary's principal, Zhang Xiaofeng, and other senior leaders and board members would also attend the cocktail party. However, after this incident, how could the Wu Ren investigation team still have the mood to attend such a banquet? They tried to reject it, but Rosefinch Secondary insisted. It was difficult to refuse such hospitality, so they could only put aside their worries and dress up to attend. Originally, Fang Yan was not qualified to attend this cocktail party. He was just an ordinary teacher at Rosefinch Secondary who had just been promoted from probation. He did not have any rank in the school. If a teacher like him could attend the cocktail party, they would probably have to prepare a hall that could accommodate hundreds of people. However, because he was one of the main receptionists for the Wu Ren investigation team, and the students from Class 9, led by him, had the upper hand in the competition with the Wu Ren investigation team, winning 3 out of 3 matches, even a leader like Li Ziqiang, who was extremely dissatisfied with Fang Yan, felt that he should invite Fang Yan over on such a day to reward him. In the past, most of the matches between Rosefinch and Wu Ren were evenly matched. Sometimes, they would even lose more than they won. They had never been suppressed like this, so much so that they could not even show their faces. Therefore, Fang Yan became the most relaxed person at the cocktail party. Everyone else was busy exchanging pleasantries and drinking, or saying goodbye reluctantly. Only Fang Yan was not loved by anyone. Those who were of a high enough rank were not willing to get close to him. Those who were not of a high enough rank were the students from the Wu Ren investigation team. They could not wait to surround Fang Yan and beat him up. Who would be willing to come up and drink with him? A person's loneliness was not loneliness. If you still felt lonely standing in the middle of a crowd, it meant that you were not popular. Fang Yan decided not to be a cheapskate anymore. Cheapskates have no friends. He sat alone in the corner of the hall, holding a glass of wine and thinking. "Sorry to disturb you," Chiba Kaori said gently as she stood in front of Fang Yan. She didn't speak well in Huaxia, and Fang Yan didn't understand Japanese, so she could only speak in English. Fang Yan looked up at the beautiful Japanese girl and asked, "What's the matter?" I'm here to apologize to you on behalf of Chiba Halmu, said Chiba Kaori. I know that there's a custom in Huaxia to apologize with wine. She turned around and took a glass of red wine from the tray the waiter was holding and said, I'll drink to apologize. She held the glass with both hands and drank the red wine in one gulp. Then, she put down the empty glass, took another glass of red wine, and drank it again. After 3 glasses, she wiped the wine off the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief. She looked at Fang Yen and said, I hope you can accept Chiba Halmu's apology. I don't accept it, said Fang Yen. Chiba Kaori looked at Fang Yen in surprise. She didn't understand what he meant. First, we in Huaxia do have a custom of drinking to apologize, but it's mainly done among our colleagues and friends. Does Chiba Halmu think of us as friends? Second, we drink with white wine. A large glass of white wine. Is a sip of red wine an apology? This is your apology, not Chiba Halmu's apology. I believe that a guy who stabbed his opponent after a duel won't repent so easily, right? I think he hates me even more now. That's my guess. I don't care if you believe it or not, but I do. Of course, I have nothing to fear. If he dares to come, I'll just beat him up again. And the fourth. Actually, I only like to say 3 things because it sounds more complete. Adding a 4th thing feels a little out of place. Don't doubt that I'm a Virgo. You're not only here to drink to apologize, but also for something else, right? Chiba Kaori's breathing quickened. Her eyes widened unnaturally as she stared at Fang Yen. Everyone in the investigation team said that Huaxia was treacherous and cunning, and it seemed to be true. His eyes were always smiling, as if there was nothing he didn't know. Fang Yen picked up the glass and took a sip of the juice. He looked up at Chiba Kaori and said, So, what's your purpose? Fight? You can't beat me. Quarrel? You're not that kind of person, and neither am I. Threatening me before leaving doesn't seem to have any meaning. Fang Yen suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Are you here to be friends with me? That must be it. One must know that women's desire to compare themselves with others was very strong. She lost to Chinitian in the tea ceremony, so she must be very angry. They were both proud and arrogant girls, so why was she stronger than them? Coincidentally, she heard rumors that Chinitian liked her, so she wanted to be the first to conquer her. That way, she would be able to surpass Chinitian. So what if you're good at making tea? So what if you have a strong aura? I still got the boy you like first. Fang Yen was very angry. What did they think he was? Hearing Fang Yan's words, Chiba Kaori became very embarrassed. She looked at Fang Yen and said, I just want to tell you on behalf of Chiba Halmu. He will definitely defeat you. He will defeat you fair and square. I like idiots who can't beat others but like to look forward to the future. It's as if he can't beat me now, but he can beat me in the future. Since he has this intention, I have no reason not to help him. Which ward is he staying in? I'll give him a chance to defeat me fair and square. He's a guest, so I can't let him leave with regrets. Sensei Fang Yen, I'm not talking about now. Chiba Kaori felt that she couldn't communicate with Fang Yen. What she meant was to give Chiba Halmu some confidence and more motivation. She would tell Chiba Halmu that she had already challenged Fang Yen on his behalf. Moreover, she would tell Chiba Halmu that she had predicted his victory in front of Fang Yen. Who said that the competition was going to start now? When is that? Fang Yen asked. When Chiba Halmu steps on Huaxia's soil again. Chiba Kaori said. She knew that if Chiba Halmu didn't have the confidence to defeat Fang Yen, he probably wouldn't step on Huaxia's soil again. Fang Yen shook his head and said, It seems that the initiative is in Chiba Halmu's hands. If he can't beat me and hides in some Japanese village, where will I go to find him? You are insulting a swordsman's desire to win, Chiba Kaori said. I'm short-sighted. Why don't I go and let him beat me up now? Not far away, Vice Headmaster Matsushima Ki, who was drinking and chatting with Lu Chaoga, saw Fang Yen and Chiba Kaori in the corner. He immediately frowned and whispered to Saburo Fujino, who was beside him, Chiba Kaori and Fang Yen are together. Hurry up and go take a look. Don't let Chiba Kaori get bullied. Seeing that, Saburo Fujino was greatly shocked and he quickly moved toward the two of them. Fire, theft, and Fang Yen. This was the consensus of the Wu Ren inspection team. This is an unforgettable trip for me. Matsushima Ki stood on the tea stage and gave a speech. This was the usual procedure of a cocktail party. She looked at the crowd below the stage with a solemn expression and said, I have led groups to over 20 countries and participated in nearly 100 exchange and inspection activities. However, none of them have been as shocking and thought-provoking as this one. Yes, I have been reflecting on it for the past few days. I have been reflecting on our mentality, our attitude, and more importantly, what is Wu Ren lacking? Wu Ren is a top-notch school in Japan, and its students are all favored by the heavens. Thus, be it Wu Ren's teachers or students, we are filled with pride and a sense of accomplishment. Pride is not wrong, and achievement is not wrong, but the mistake is that while we maintain our pride, we lose the modesty and respect for our friends. Not only are we outstanding, our friends are also outstanding. Rosefinch Secondary has proven this point with its 3 victories. The culture of the Tang dynasty is in Japan. Many people say that. Sometimes, even I feel proud of it. I thought that it was us, Japan, who had preserved and developed the culture of the Tang dynasty in Huaxia. We have a heart that cherishes and passes down our traditional culture. However, this time, I found out that it is not the case. We package our culture and display its essence to the world. However, this culture has been integrated into the lives of the people of Huaxia. This is too common for them. However, when there is a challenge, when the country needs it, countless outstanding people will step forward, to fight for dignity, to fight for victory. We have witnessed all of this with our own eyes. We have lost. We have lost our dignity, Matsushima Ki said with incomparable honesty. We have also won. Me, my students, and every member of our Wu Ren inspection team, we have learned to reflect. We have a humble and unyielding determination. I believe in my students. I believe in my colleagues. I will bring back the defeat of these 3 matches as the greatest gift. The applause was thunderous. Sitting on the plane to Japan, all the members of the Wu Ren inspection team heaved a sigh of relief. Huaxia is too scary, someone said. That's right. Chiba Haomu is invincible, but he was defeated by them. Any random teacher is so powerful. Is their school full of such masters? Chapter 91. The happiest person was Tangsheng when the Wu Ren investigation team left. He jumped up from the bed excitedly and said, They really left? Qinye Haowu left too. They left. Qinitian sat on the chair and was peeling an apple in her hand. Her movements were very skillful, and the whole piece of apple skin became a piece. It looked very beautiful as it hung in the air. That's great. If Qinye Haowu is fine, I won't have to lie in bed for half a year, Tangxing said happily. He had been worrying about this matter for the whole day yesterday. If Qinye Haowu really stayed in Huaxia and didn't leave, then his life would be ruined. He did not want to spend his youth lying in bed in a vegetative state. He did not expect that in just one day, Qinye Haowu would return to the country, and Qinitian, whom he could not forget, would take the initiative to visit him. Was there anything more blissful than this? Half a year? Qinitian raised his eyebrows and quickly understood. Fang Yen asked you to do it? Fang Yen sensei was worried that they would go back on their word, so you guys decided to go back on your word first? I did not. Tangxing quickly explained. He was worried that Qinitian would think that he was a dishonest boy who liked to play tricks. He said, Sensei Fang Yen asked me to do it. He saved me. I had to do it. Fighting poison with poison is indeed a good idea, Qinitian said. At least, this is the best way to deal with those who do not keep their word. Tang Qing felt a little upset in his heart. Why was Qin Tian always praising Fang Yan's teacher when it came to him? She was not a girl who liked to praise others. He wanted to ask what the relationship between Qin Tian and Fang Yan was, but he could not bring himself to ask. It was rare for them to be so harmonious, and he did not want to ruin the atmosphere at this moment. Pack. After peeling the apple, the peel fell into the trash can on the ground. Tang Qing said pitifully, "Be careful not to cut your hand. If I want to eat it, I can do it myself, ka-cha." Qin Tian took a bite of the apple and chewed on the crisp and sweet flesh. He looked at Tang Qing and asked, "What did you say?" Tang Qing swallowed his saliva and said, I say, this apple tastes good, right?" Dong dong, there was a knock on the door. Tang Qing shouted, "Please come in." Two girls in Rosefinch's uniform stood at the door with a bouquet in their hands. Their faces were red as they said, "Student Tang Qing, we heard that you were injured, so we came to see you." When they saw Qin Tian sitting in front of the window in the ward, they hurriedly greeted Qin Tian and said, "Senior Sister Tian is here too." This was already the 20th batch of girls who had come to visit Tang Qing in the past 2 days. Some came alone, some came in groups, and some came in groups. Tang Qing, the most handsome boy in Rosefinch, was indeed very charming. This time, after he seriously injured a kendo master sent by Japan, his reputation was pushed to an unprecedented height. They sent flowers, apples, and all kinds of gifts. The apple that Qin Tian ate was given by them. Qin Tian smiled and nodded at them. He stood up from the chair and said to Tang Qing, "I still have something to do, so I'll leave you in the care of my junior sisters." Gotcha, she took another bite of the apple. "What are you going to do?" Tang Qing asked hurriedly. He hoped that Qin Tian would stay and take care of him the most. No, it was fine for him to take care of Qin Tian. Qin Tian thought about it and said, "I'm going to sleep. I seem a little sleepy." "Senior Sister Tian, take care." The two girls standing at the door greeted her respectfully. It wasn't until Qin Tian's figure was far away that they felt the suffocating feeling disappear. "Classmate Tang Qing, are you okay?" The girls laughed and surrounded him. "Sorry." Tang Qing looked at them and said, "Can you peel an apple for me?" "Of course, no problem," the girls said happily. After all, not everyone had the opportunity to peel an apple for the most handsome boy in school. As soon as Fang Yan appeared at the door of Lu Chaoga's office, the secretary, Xiao Meng, who was sitting at the front desk, exclaimed, "Ah, Fang Yan." As soon as she shouted, the people in the surrounding offices all craned their heads to look over. "He's Fang Yan. He looks so young. He knows martial arts. He doesn't look like it, but he's quite handsome. It's my favorite dish. He's the one who beat up the Japanese, like that. I heard that person is very powerful in Japan." After 2 days of adaptation, Fang Yan was already used to this kind of discussion. If the exchange competition with the Wuren investigation team caused Tang Qing's popularity to soar, then Fang Yan really became famous after this battle. Not only did he save Tang Qing at the critical moment, he even beat up Qianya Haowu in front of everyone, causing everyone's eyes to pop out of their sockets. Now, the students of Class 9 walked on campus with their heads held high. Regardless of whether people asked, they would take the initiative to say, "Don't mess with me, our teacher knows martial arts." Fang Yan, this teacher who had just come to Rosefinch Secondary for a short period of time, had refreshed people's understanding of him and his own limits time and time again. Fang Yan waved his hand at everyone and said, "Go back. Everyone, go back. I'm just an ordinary person. It's enough to watch for a few minutes. Don't let it affect your work." "You're not ordinary at all," Xiao Meng said with a red face. "I saw it with my own eyes. You're amazing." Xiao Meng was Lu Chaoga's secretary. After Jing Jing was not welcomed by Lu Chaoga would bring Xiao Meng wherever she went. When Fang Yan beat up Chiba Haowu, Xiao Meng was also one of the bystanders. However, there were too many people watching at that time, and her boss was also beside her. Even though she felt that her heart was about to jump out of her chest, she could not take the initiative to express her admiration to Fang Yan. "Don't tell anyone. I'm a very low-key person," Fang Yan said with a smile. "Is Principal Lu in his office?" "Yes. Principal Lu is waiting for you in his office. He said that you can go straight in when you arrive." Xiao Meng's eyes were filled with affection. She looked at Fang Yan and said, "Mr. Fang, Transformers is on. Can I treat you to a movie?" "I don't watch cartoons," Fang Yan said. "It's not cartoons, it's..." Before Xiao Meng finished speaking, Fang Yan had already pushed the door and walked into Lu Chaoga's office. He ran so fast. Xiao Meng's eyes were full of little stars. No wonder he is so good at fighting. Lu Chaoga was looking at a file. This was Fang Yan's file. The file was very simple, so simple that people felt it was not simple. Lu Chaoga knew that either there was a problem with this file, or there was a problem with Fang Yan. Or, there was a problem with both of them. She also heard Xiao Meng shouting outside the office. She knew that Fang Yan was now the hottest celebrity in the entire Rosefinch secondary. Even Tang Cheng, the most popular guy in Rosefinch, was not as famous as him. Who asked him to be saved by Fang Yan? Moreover, a teacher, in order to avenge his own student, actually beat up a student from the inspection team in front of so many people. Which student wouldn't like such a protective teacher? Now, Fang Yan had already become the guardian angel in the mouth of many students. As Rosefinch's students boasted to the outside world, the entire student community in Huaqing now knew that Rosefinch had a teacher who knew Kung Fu. Lu Chaoga smiled bitterly. She really didn't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. Seeing Fang Yan push the door open and come in, Lu Chaoga said, "Sit down." She took out her tea can from her drawer and pushed it over, saying, "If you want tea, make it yourself." Fang Yan didn't sit down. He looked at Lu Chaoga with a strange expression and said, "Principal Lu, don't be so nice to me. Once you're nice to me, I feel that this is the last conversation we'll have. You want to expel me again, right? If you don't want to drink, then forget it." Lu Chaoga reached out to take the tea can back. "Drink." Fang Yan quickly reached out and not only grabbed the tea can, but he also grabbed Lu Chaoga's hand. Lu Chaoga's ears were slightly red, and she looked at Fang Yan with a sharp gaze. What she meant was, "Hurry up and let go of my hand." Fang Yan didn't seem to feel the murderous intent in Lu Chaoga's eyes and said, "If you let go of the tea can, I'll let go." Lu Chaoga was so angry that she almost laughed. "You're holding my hand, how do you expect me to let go of the tea can?" "Let go," Lu Chaoga said in a low voice. "If you promise." Fang Yan originally wanted to insist, but seeing that Lu Chaoga's expression wasn't right, he quickly let go. "Whether you promise or not, I'll let go." Lu Chaoga put the tea can in front of Fang Yan, but she didn't take it back. She looked up and down at Fang Yan, and after a serious look, she asked, "Fang Yan, what else are you hiding from me?" "Too much." Fang Yan said very frankly. "My parents' hobbies, first love's name, 3 measurements, and so on. I didn't tell you. I don't need to know these things." Lu Chaoga wanted to get angry again. "I know. That's why I didn't tell you." Lu Chaoga stared at Fang Yan with a sharp gaze, and said, "You know how to arrange flowers, know calligraphy, have a deep literary foundation, have a great-grandfather, and have profound kung fu. Fang Yan, who are you? Why did you come to Rosefinch? Others don't know why I came to Rosefinch, but don't you know?" Fang Yan asked aloud. Lu Chaoga's heartbeat sped up for no reason, and she said expressionlessly, "How would I know why you came?" She was worried that Fang Yan would say something messy, and faintly, worried that he wouldn't say those words. "For the inheritance." Fang Yan said in a deep voice. "I want to teach them how to arrange flowers, I want to teach them calligraphy, I want them to appreciate the glory of Chinese culture, I want them to not be bullied." Spider-Man said that the greater a person's ability, the more responsibility he has. I want to follow his example and contribute what I have learned to the country, to society, and to my students. Yes, I'm such a person. A person who is simple but not simple, ordinary but not ordinary. Tell me the truth. Lu Chaoga shouted angrily. I'm afraid. You don't know, that woman hits people too hard. I'm scared of her. Fong Yen said with a sad face, feeling wronged. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.